We'll go ahead and call the PMC meeting order. Up at 7:22. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate everybody getting up bright and early. Feel free to take 32 minutes off this afternoon.
You got some people you can call.
Yeah.
Okay, she won't be there.
It's only fair.
No.
All right, so let's go ahead and recap. We had a motion on the floor. What I'm going to suggest, Gary, if you're okay with that, Shane seconded it because we did call a new meeting. We'll start over, but we do have it memorialized. Rick took some notes and sent me an email which we distributed with the motion that was discussed. So everybody's got it in front of them. And that way we don't have to go back and have Rick read it 4 times and aggravate it. Okay. So I'm going to quickly go over it. And just again, I'm reading it. Everybody has a copy of it. It should be what we counted out this morning. Those online, Jeff's online. Rick or somebody can send that. Who else is online?
Crystal, I'll forward it to you or something.
Okay. Who else is online?
We have Carolyn Campbell, Kurt Lewick, Jeff Wilkins, and Steve Shepard from the membership and the liaisons.
Okay. So maybe if we can send that to you.
I'll take those out to everybody. Yep.
That would be great. Thank you. So first item, and again, I'm going to basically read from the motion that was maybe yesterday, 2 days ago. So recommend the town of Sarita submitted new modified plan to be presented to the RTA board as TMC's recommendation. Debt service is at 77 million. Economic inflationary contingency is restored at 100 million and covered by the increase in revenue associated with the updated projections by Keller. Suggested amendments by me, agreed to by Terry and Shane, confirms that excess revenue above the 2.46 billion amount is allocated to the city of Tucson and projects to be recommended by the mayor and council while remaining within the framework of the ballot language. And a new element may be added to allow for potential expenditures for modernization, capital pavement maintenance projects. Final amendment suggested by Terry and agreed to by Shane is to allocate an amount of regional funds as needed up to $60 million to the city's Irvington Road main project from South 15th Avenue to Tucson Boulevard. And then there's a little note, however, please note funding for this project is already included under the new modified plan with excess revenues. So no vote was taken. That was the motion that was on the floor. We talked about it. So I thought we would start there. There is some information that
I'm sorry, may I just get some clarity because I had to leave at that point. So it's the projects for the city. It wouldn't be projects for the city plus the 60 million plus any plus up. It's assuming that whatever plus up includes that 60 million.
And if you don't mind, I do have some slides that would help.
Can you ask that again?
That's the last note on here, that the 60 million is already
Yeah,
included in excess funding
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. To go towards Irvington Road.
I'm just saying, it's whatever projects the city has now.
Okay.
Just to clear that,
I
it's,
understand.
you got it?
Okay. I understand. Go ahead.
So I was gonna say, if you don't mind, thanks to Beth and Shane, there's a sheet in front of you. The other one had a lot of different notes and comparisons with the previous plans. This sheet is the clean version that only has the new modified proposal on it. So we can walk through that. I got a couple of slides, so we want to do that and then ask Beth or Shane to hopefully provide a little bit more detail. And then there is a letter that was submitted from Sarita with the additional details. I think it's important to cover those since the recommendation is to consider that proposal. So with that, if you don't mind, I'll go through the slides first. All right, next, there we go. Anyway, so thanks for that recap of, thanks for the recap of the motion. So the first slide is basically what was just discussed by Mike as far as the recap. You have it in front of you as well. Next slide, please. So next one gets into a little bit more detail, and that's where I'm gonna ask either Shane or Beth to chime in. So the memo that was provided by Sarita, I think put emphasis on what do we do if there's excess revenue? So with updated information, 2.46 is now the projected revenue. The proposal is once there's excess revenue, that amount estimated currently roughly up to $300 million can be used for the categorical projects to be named in the administrative code. And then, as we discussed, Mike requested to add some additional language to the motion to have the mayor and council have essentially recommendations made on what to do with that additional roughly $300 million and include capital maintenance. Included in the summary of proposal. Because of that, the recommendation was to leave the other categoricals unnamed for future needs that may arise. And by doing so, the whole exercise of using excess revenue would release any reliance on the PAG regional funds. So with that, I'll turn it to Shane or Beth. Anything else from your memo or the table? If you want to go over the table after that, that might be helpful.
Before Beth jumps in, Mr. Chair, I think I would like to just have a recap again on the direction that this body received from the board. So what were the 3 or 4 points that I just want to make sure that that's on the forefront of our minds as we wrap our heads around whatever we're going to be making a recommendation on.
I'll be happy to. So, and it's fresh on my mind because we just posted the minutes of the RTA board meeting. So it's very specific. It was only focused on a recommendation from this body on how much contingency that we should set aside, which you already had taken action on that. And the second recommendation, the request from the board was on the amount of debt service. Those were the 2 direct requests. And then obviously, as you all know, we've been discussing other possible recommendations, but those are the only 2 that was requested by the board.
They didn't address the RTA funding, the sweeps as a board
They
directive.
made comments about it, but they did not
Part of the
request.
direction.
That was not part of the
So it was
request.
just contingency and debt service.
Correct. And then obviously phasing was part of that whole discussion, which you already addressed phasing as well.
No, and I just a clarification, Mr. Chair. So part of the discussion, but maybe not formalized in the direction like these 2 points was the flexibility.
Again,
Those are a couple of points that
we
were
would not
and
request,
I
yeah.
just want to make sure I'm clear on what the board direction was.
My notes and the minutes clearly says feedback from TMC on debt service and contingents.
I'm gonna defer a tiny bit on that. I'm gonna sit there and listen. Yes, there was direction on those 2. There was also comment, I think it was by Mayor, about the use of the PAG monies. And I think there was, I won't say consensus, but there was a lot of concern about that. Number 1. Number 2, I think that there was concern about the specificity of the categorical projects. I mean, those were pieces that I think were included. And I don't think it was just, go ahead, Terry.
No, I was just letting you know,
Oh, yeah.
once you're done.
Okay, sure. Thank you. And so I think that to say that it was only those 2 things, I don't know that was entirely our mission, because have to really analyze the impact of the. I think what we've done and what we're going, and quite frankly, the way that you all have outlined it, I think is consistent with what the board had asked us to do, which is to look at all of those together.
Okay.
Gary, and then.
So I agree with you, Mike. Having an additional conversation with my mayor, I'm pretty adamant about all 4 of those things. Flexibility and I certainly the 2 that were mentioned by Farhad, but I'm very adamant about taking funds regional funds and very adamant about making sure that we have flexibility in the plan. So those are things that I think he feels for direction, but
And Michael, if I may just, because what they did discuss, I mean, I heard that as well, but I think what I heard is this, that the pieces they asked for information about were the two. I did hear they discussed the other two a lot. I do believe that there was a lot of, I never heard them ask for any additional advice about those sort of dollars. I think they felt pretty clear about that, from what I was hearing.
So what do you all want to do?
So if you don't mind, I'd
I don't mind.
really like to go over this. Would you mind just kind of walk everybody through this since it's the motion on the floor? Yeah, well,
I don't want to walk through everything.
Yeah, that's,
So what's your, I think the recommendation, the proposal, that was presented by Sarika outlined, in a fairly clear document, how we took together columns out. And I think those now, have some clarity. I can tell you my headache continues to be that $60 million for Irvington. To not include that as a part of the plan is problematic. The other thing is not including and the main projects I know are in here with the safety and active transportation, but I need to include those. Now, I don't have to have them in the plan for me to go back to my folks, because we can define those later. But the amount of those is important because that offsets what I believe is a shortfall on the. So I'm just saying what you just said 2 days ago. Go ahead, Jim.
and one thing what I've got looking at and thinking about after I understand if Irvington needs to come back in, I think we can have that conversation because we've been sort of talking about whether it's a plus up now or later. So a piece that and I hate to go backwards and I apologize, but I want to look a little bit at the no cap. And I'll just tell you what I'm wondering about is, let's say the world is really good and millions come in more, hundreds of millions more. I'm wondering if it would work for the city and others to say that additional funds up to the, a couple of other up to the optimistic projection, all go to the city. And then anything above that might have a conversation, or all dollars up to ensure, beyond optimistic that ensures that the city's percentage of overall projects is at least X. But I just am concerned that saying the whole kit and caboodle goes to the city might need a tweak a bit.
Well, I should have that. I would if I was sitting where you are. I think that's fair, and I think that's a reasonable thought. So let me give you another thought about that. I really like it. I'll come to the city.
Thank you. And Sam will second that. Yeah, there you go. That's all business here.
But let me give you another thought that rather on my head. If you remember right at the very end, what I suggested was, why don't we include the regional monies and then allow those to be reimbursed by excess revenue first. Remember, I made that.
That wasn't clear, but I see where you're going.
Yeah, I made that thought, at least I voiced that thought. But I thought of another way to maybe do it to get your mayors more comfortable. If we reduced the contingency and the debt service and basically said that as excess dollars come in, those are the first pots that are increased up to some agreed upon number. We get to the same place because we're looking for 60 plus, right? We're looking for 60. I'll talk about the categories here in a minute. If you think about it, we take the regional money off the table. Instead, what we're doing is in the base plan, we've still got placeholders for contingency. We've still got placeholders for debt service. So as time goes on and revenues come in, there's an opportunity to feed those buckets first. Kind of like what we were talking about program before we have the numbers for the event. What that does is that gives you the opportunity to go back to your folks and say, hey, we're not going to use the regional money. It's in essence the same exact thing. It's just instead of replenishing the regional money, it replenishes the debt service and the contingency first. So that's a thought.
Sure.
And the suggestion that I would offer to come up with that 60 million is we had in excess of 125 million in the new projection. 100 of that was put into the economic contingency. There's still 25 floating around. In the original Town of Sarita proposal, there was also an excess 8 million in the difference. So that gets us to 33. In what's shown here, that 8 million was just simply added into the categorical bucket. So now we're looking for $27 million essentially. And I mean, maybe it makes sense to just take that 27 million out of the categoricals to make sure that Irvington gets funded and then fund the categoricals at $220 million or so.
7 months.
Yeah. So
Go ahead, sir.
I was actually gonna go to the same place. I got there a little bit differently than perhaps Beth did, but I think that I live with that more so. It just concerns me, especially with related to the ability to bond payments or borrow, that we're gonna do that down the line if the money's coming. So that's the thing that concerns me about that. I think we get there with the 25 plus the 8 and pulling some money out of categoricals to get us there.
Sure. Just a point of clarification, I thought the 25 went to fill out debt service.
No, the proposal that came back already had 77 as
It
debt
already-
service.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay,
So if I understand what you're suggesting, and I think looking at the numbers would help. So you're looking at 298 on the assumed excess revenue. And difference between the total request so far and projected revenue is roughly about that $20 million that you're talking about. So by reducing the 298 by $40 million, you get there. The 298 becomes 250. And then you can put Irvington back in.
Yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, we would do that.
Let's go back to the slide, if you don't mind. Let's go back to the slide that had the recap of the proposal.
Go back a little bit. There we go.
So my understanding of that was. My understanding of the number was that the 2.46, the total budget, is that correct?
That is the projected revenue, yes.
Right, but that's the total budget that we're dealing, is that correct?
I think the proposal is to assume that we're gonna go over that by roughly $300 million.
That's a problem for me. All right, so it wasn't clicking, now I understand that. So my understanding of where the proposal was that you were taking the pessimistic forecast, the new pessimistic forecast, which was 2.46, correct?
Yes, so far,
2.46.
that's what we're taking,
As a starting point.
right?
And we were shoehorning the entirety of the plan into that. Right?
But not as a budget,
entirety of the.
but that's not the
Well,
budget.
The entire plan, all of the plan.
And continue with, including the
Because what
contingency.
that does is by adding 300 million to that, that's in essence assuming that we're going to be at the baseline or higher,
Correct.
which is not what I thought. we
Got
were.
it. And so if the city's addition,
Well, yeah.
if it's based on pessimistic and you get the extra, but we've taken pessimistic off the table,
Right.
we've taken off the ability for any extra. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying. And until I saw that, I'm like, wait a minute, because the anticipated revenue was 125 of excess, which was from the 2.34 to the 2.46. What am I missing?
If I may again,
Sure.
if I may again, so my understanding of the discussion and the proposal was, and I think a couple folks brought it up on Monday. We're assuming 246 is the pessimistic estimate. If we assume that the economy is going to perform better, comfortably, you can assume up to 2.75 based on even the studies would support that. And that would be where the baseline would be. So the difference between the pessimistic and the baseline is roughly that $300 million. And the proposal states that that $300 million be set aside for those categorical projects.
So the context, Mr. Chair, of the town's proposal, which I thought maybe I didn't make very clear 2 days ago, but was in reference to the memo that you put out to your council in early February. And in that, the clear message there was a concern by the city that according to the latest developed plans of the RTA, if you were to commit yourselves as a city to that plan, you'd be walking away from millions of dollars every year. So it was clear to the city, it was clear to the town that whatever numbers we were operating under were not numbers that you believe were going to be the outcome as a city. And so this plan was put together to recognize that, all right, the rest of the region is going off this pessimistic projection. If the city believes that the outcome is going to be much better than that, then why don't we earmark 100% of that to the city? And that's where a lot of the additional projects that you wanted to have, that's where that fell into.
So I'm fine with that. I understand what you just said, and that's what I was tracking.
But I think that's here too.
Well, let me tell you the way I interpret that.
Okay.
That anything above the 2.46 would go towards the city. That's not what I'm saying here.
That's exactly.
Show me how that is the 2.75 the new budget for the entirety of the program?
2.75 is aligns closely with the baseline projection.
So basically, we've modified this to become a baseline projection, if I'm understanding you, Mike, but that was not the proposal that put forth. It was use the pessimistic, and then extra that comes in is, I like the phrase, earmarked for city use. And we've calculated that to be approximately this number, but that was your intent is if it comes in.
And we're just trying to be respectful of where the board has been at, and they're saying, hey, we're using the pessimistic model. However, however this needs to be couched and what vernacular needs to be used, but the idea is that the excess, if we see above the pessimistic, outcome, the excess would go to.
So Mike, if you're interpreting this, we're going to a baseline amount. This is now going and saying the baseline amount is the 275.
And we're doing that up front.
And we're doing that up front we're assuming now the baseline scenario. That's how I understand it.
Chair, real quick, I was out of town on Monday and didn't make the meeting, so I got a couple of really quick questions. The 2.46 is the pessimistic. The 2.75 is the best guess. Was there also an optimistic number at the top?
Yes, the optimistic goes all the way up to 2.9 roughly.
Thank you. And then in Mike's amendment request that generally was acceptable, we talked about capital pavement maintenance projects. I assume that's for all municipalities, or was that tied to City of Tucson?
So my intent was that it would be a line item that is built in so that the mayor and council could allocate part of that excess revenue to that line item.
Okay.
But I would also suggest that could be available to everyone across the board.
Okay. And then
My understanding goes, it has to be in the plan in order for us to be able to spend dollars.
absolutely, yeah.
So that would be in
But there's no direct funding in this 2.46 or the 2.75. That's, we have the ability to do maintenance projects in the event that there's excess money.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Bill.
So to the point that I made earlier then, so maybe address the future maintenance is we have the 2.46, which is the pessimistic. We have the main city projects in the category that takes us to that 2.7. That if we actually do go gangbusters and we make it to that 2.9 or anything above that, that get allocated, you know, it could be used for pavement maintenance by anyone regionally. So to your point, we would have a line item for it that if we completed all these other projects, which would be, you know, for a large part named by the city or the other categoricals that the other jurisdictions want to do, and there's still more money, that now we can start on other projects, you know, to include pavement maintenance with that up to that, you know, over that 2.1.
Well,
I'm sorry,
I'm
Jan, go ahead.
I just was, sorry, I'm just trying to really get clear. Thank you, whatever, but, because I think that, Michael, the concern that I heard you saying is if we set a new base at the 2.7, it does not leave that cushion for the city to get something any more than that. What I'm seeing is, right, just around numbers, we're looking at 2.45 billion as our plan. The next 300 million, if you will, goes to the city of Tucson, right? And then anything above that, we can all look at coming back to the whole for the good of the region.
That's not the optimistic, that's the base.
I'm trying to get away.
0.7 is basically.
Baseline 2.9 is.
None is.
Okay, but I guess what I'm just trying to get to is you get your 300 million of that. Right? I mean, because it's just, we're talking about moving lines and I just want to make sure that we're not saying it in a way that,
It might be problematic to call the 2.75 the new baseline.
I think that, yeah, maybe we stick with the 2.46.
2.4 is the base, and then above the 2.4 up to the 300 million is automatically the cities to help take care of these additional projects. And anything in excess of that can be used for
By the RTA, board at their discretion, at the RTA's discretion.
And you know, that seems to make a lot of sense because of where we would as a region have put things like maintenance. However, I think there's an argument that some of the modernization projects and some of our projects as a whole, you know, is in the spirit of taking care of our pavement. So we do have a bit of a bleed over in some of the things that we're talking about.
So I'm still, I guess, maybe confused how we got off on this tangent when we were talking about 60 million for a single project, specifically Irvington. And we identified 25 million from the 125 based on the Eller numbers, right? So that got us closer. We talked about the 8 million that the plan didn't include. So now we're up to 33 million. So we're still talking about 23 million that was still that is above the base plan of 2.46, right? So where are we getting the additional 23 million? That's the question.
I would suggest moving out of the baseline category.
And I'm fine with that.
So that categorical number.
That's where I thought we were. So I don't understand how that affects, I don't understand how that affects the optimist or the,
So
now.
we just did a calculation just to help you. So currently it says $298 million for excess revenue. If you reduce that to 286 and subtract the 60 and put the 60 back under corridors, then that's the math. So excess becomes 286 and 60 goes back to the corridors.
So where I'm stuck is, I'm looking at the green one. Where do we knock out $60 million to bring Irvington back on?
Yeah, we can't.
Well, you don't have to knock out 60. You have to knock out 20.
No, we'll have room for.
All right, hang on.
Yeah.
You got it.
I'm referencing.
Go ahead.
I'm struggling with taking any money from the excess column because that's part of that 300 million. That's the excess. we have to take it from the categorical subtotal in the base from the 2.4.
Oh, I got you. I thought you meant from the excess.
That's where I get confused.
Okay.
That's where-
I thought Beth was talking about taking it from the categorical, but then we went over.
I thought you meant excess. Yes.
No, we can't tap excess because
We don't know.
because right now, our plan shows that it's coming out of excess.
I got you.
So it can't come from that right column. It has to come from the green column. And the suggestion is that it would come from the categorical bucket in the green column.
And based on this sheet, all 60 million's got to come out of that because,
Not all of it, no.
well,
30 or 23 million of it.
this uses all 200 or 2.46.
Yeah, that's about $12 million if it's coming from the green column.
So, yeah, because the way this with this sheet was revised.
Yeah.
That the, everything would come out of the green column and it would come out of
Yeah.
the,
What line? What line?
um,
So that delta is 12 million. There's 12 million unprogrammed in the green column.
yeah, it would come out of, well,
No, it's 2.4. Oh, that's the revenue
yeah, we
funding.
have to redo the breakdown for either like line 43 or 46, like, over the. So, combination of the two.
Essentially to stay within the 2.46 on the green one.
Right.
We have.
Yeah, that's how I take.
Yeah.
That's how I read.
Is the 60 million gonna be in the green column?
Yes.
Yes.
60 million will be on the green.
Yes.
And we're still at 2.46.
That's correct.
So yeah, adjustment to the two categoricals as Beth described, moves Irvington back into what I think Shane referred to as the base scenario.
So we have Irvington back in.
Yep.
Irvington is back in. So good go. On that.
There was the caveat on that.
Move to page two.
Adjourn, yeah.
Move to page 1.5. All right, so page 2. So on the category. Explain to me how you are going to. How those are going to be allocated. I want to understand that because, again, I go back to specificity of important things. Okay, how we do that, if it's not important to you all, I'm good. And I'm also understanding the possibility. I understand. I need to know how I'm going to show in the categoricals the projects. Now, they don't have to be on the plan that goes to the board. I just need to know the amount. Because then what I'll do is I'll tell my mayor and council, here's the amount, here are all the projects for me. That's a little map and I'll get that. Okay, and
Well, I'm sorry, but what I heard earlier was when it was described that these would be covered in administrative code, is that the language used? And so I wondered if that is what we need to make sure that there's something documented, included as a policy decision, if you will, by the RTA board that we can also clarify in documents or things. I say it because we have the same, my concern is the Green Valley area.
I'm in agreement.
Because that's where they have.
I'm in agreement. And again, for these purposes, I think it's the total, is the amount, right? It's important. And then the specificity of that is important.
And Mike, can I ask a quick question in yours?
Go ahead and mention.
Are you talking the categoricals in the green that are the undefined or in the yellow that's the excess?
Yellow.
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 I understand the yellow.
So that's the problem.
Yeah. I think you're talking about the green.
I have.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
So the capital we were talking about the green.
Are you in that half of the?
I'm on the.
And we're talking about the green.
So what time?
Let me walk you through why.
To your right.
Putting here. So I appreciate excess funds. I understand that. We'll talk about that here in a minute. I understand that the concept there. I think we're going in the right direction. What I need to understand though is in the green, call it the green, what is the city of Tucson's share of that? How much money is coming out of that Because if the idea is that all of those categoricals will be excess funds, we don't have a deal. That's what I'm saying to you. So I need to understand what the expectation is for the city council. Which one?
So if it may help, that was the conversation at the board level to leave those buckets for prioritizing and allocation of those funds over the 20-year life of the plan. That follows our normal process of call for projects. All the committees involved typically prioritize projects and make recommendations to the RTA board. So at this point, there is no allocation for anyone specific. It's over the life of the plan at the discretion of the RTA board.
Okay, well, then I will say it again, that's a problem. That's what they're trying to say for months, that's a problem. Now, again, we don't have to establish, you all aren't interested in establishing your projects and that's fine. I'm gonna have to do that. That's why I keep that same numbers.
So, understanding the need for flexibility, which is something that certainly my mayor, and I think other mayors expressed as well, understanding the position that Farhad just stated. I also think that the board indicated multiple times, I know my mayor has indicated to me personally, that putting some projects in the categoricals was acceptable. Right. And so I don't know what some means, but you know, there was an expression from the county that having something in Green Valley identified so that people who were voting go, okay, I see myself in this plan and I can vote for this, I can get behind it. And I'm hearing essentially what the county's concern is shared by the city, that there is a number of areas and projects that people need to see actually in the plan so that they can say, I can get behind this. So I don't know what some is, and I don't know how far down the list of categorical monies we identify. But I personally, and I think my mayor would support this, am okay with some of that. And I guess that would need to hear maybe a little bit more from the county and from the city. How much do you think some is? Is it 25% of the categoricals? Is it 30%?
We can say the name, the projects. I'm sorry, Terry. But
No,
I think we could
please.
identify the projects we need named, right?
Yeah, so from the county standpoint, it was Camino de la Canela at 4.8, and then it was White House Canyon at $1 million. So 5.8 million is what we talked about last time. And we had a conversation at our last meeting about, is 50%, right, a reasonable split between named and then unnamed funding in that category. Mike, you had indicated that that wasn't adequate potentially for the city, and I thought that you were maybe going to come with maybe a refined idea. Okay, perfect. Yeah, that would be super helpful. And yeah, I just for me, I mean, dropping the categories that were comparison on here has made it a little bit challenging to track how we got here from where we were last time, just for me personally. And I mean, just one item that also needs to be addressed on here, the transit element subcategorical breakout on this new summary doesn't total 610 million. It only totals 482.5 million. So I'm lost sort of in translation here. Hopefully we can get ourselves reoriented around that.
Is that,
That's on
is that,
page 3.
you're not, oh,
All right.
Let me tell you some.
But that affects the overall, calculation. That's where,
Let me tell you my observation here. Maybe this is where, this is actually very helpful. Thank you for doing this again. Well, whoever does this. But what it looks like happened is all of the city of Tucson's categoricals were shifted over to the excess revenue.
That's exactly what happened.
Yeah. That was not what I understood we were doing. The conversation we were having was defining the categoricals, trying to define some category and some flexibility. But again, I was focused on what's the pot. That I'll define them later. That's what's that's a conversation we have down the road. But then the excess revenue would go towards whatever the mayor and council deemed appropriate. And I have no problem listing those now in terms of priority. But it was not, the spirit intent of that, at least on my end, was not to shift them to the excess revenue and say, if we get the money, then we're gonna be okay, then they'll skewer them. So that's where I'm at. That's why I keep saying the green column, okay, is the base for this conversation. The excess, that extra 300 million, it is a conversation for revenue that comes in above the base plan. The base plan has to be able to stand on its own. At least that I can go back and recommend and justify it to the council. I can't do it.
So right now, I mean, we have a process for how we allocate those categories that, you know, starts at the TPC, forward A, and project. And I guess the intent of that green bucket is that, you know, that's the way this would continue to work, that you came forward and you had a project. Also, the intent of the, I'll call it, you know, I'm referring to the green, that those should be the priority projects that as jurisdictions, we should, because those items will be named on the ballot. We should be focusing on getting those completed first. But it doesn't mean, at least in my head, that, I mean, again, this is a regional plan that we come together as a regional group for the TBC, the TMC, to talk about, hey, these are our needs. That if at those TBC meetings that the city came forward and said, hey, you know, we're in year 3 and one of these projects in the yellow, which is included in the plan, has become a real priority for us and a priority for the region. Let's have a discussion at the TBC level that, you know, can we get this started now? That we have that process in place, and that discussion could occur at that point about, hey, where are we in the delivery on those green projects? Do we have the capacity to start, or the need to start delivering some of these other projects? And having that discussion at that point, because the city still does get an allocation of that green bucket. So, you know, kind of moving some of those projects, you know, like ahead, I don't know if it would necessarily be an issue, that we do have that process that exists today.
Sure. Yeah, I just, back to your point, Mike, I think that if I understand the way this is gonna be displayed to the public, is that only what's in green is gonna be shown to the public. And so what that means, is the city of Tucson only has 6 projects and transit, and that's it. And I think that's the problem that I see from my perspective. I get the process that Beth just laid out, but how do we, the city of Tucson, sell a plan that has 6 projects and transit to our voters?
So I think if we go back a few steps in the RTA board's action, when they gave direction to TMC to come up with a recommended plan, they said, start with 4.2 and 5.1. And included in that action was to identify which of the categorical projects could be named. So right, Terry, that's what his point was earlier. And so I think that there is a space for us to name some of the categorical projects. And I'd really love to hear, Mike, from the city in terms of what you think, right, the right split of named and unnamed are. And so the county would like to see those 2 Green Valley projects get named in that categorical. And then combined with whatever the city is suggesting, are we comfortable enough to say, these are named, the balance of that bucket is unnamed?
Appreciate that. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Somebody else is.
It's Beth, and then I'll,
And then fine.
I just want to respond to that as well.
Go ahead.
So for Sam's question, even the CDC has been asking the question about what do we do with excess funds? I would assume that the public would have that same question. I would provide all of this to the public.
Yeah, that's
Because that question would come up that, okay, what if there's more money? What do we do with it? How is that going to get programmed? I would suggest all of this goes to the public, including, you know, these projects, that they would know that if there's excess over the 2.4, these additional projects, that's what we're gonna do with it, to give, that transparency.
But that's what I was gonna say. So there's an educational pamphlet that goes along with the ballot. Last time we did the same thing. In the educational pamphlet, you can list projects, you can, the description obviously would say, if there's additional funds available, these are the projects that will be funded. All that information will be provided to the public.
Got it, I'm clear, and I agree, okay? But I think, what do you say?
Actually,
Actually, I'm trying to find a reason to read it. But back to your point. So I'm happy to do that. We've already done it. And the challenge that I'm having is, if you remember, again, I go back to, as Sam outlined, we've got 6 projects that are listed on the corridor, which shows a very small investment in the city of Tucson. So what I did, and I told you that months ago now, is I said, all right, fine. Now let me look at the categoricals. Let me demonstrate what the investment will be from this categoricals. And then I gave you all those project lists. And I went through a lot of energy and effort to identify corridor elements or corridor projects that we could put into the elements. Remember, we went through that exercise, and that's what I presented, because that way I can demonstrate to mayor and council of voters, here's the investment citywide, here's what it looks like. Whole plan, not just corridor or safety or some of these others, right? And to go back now and say, well, we're not going to, it's problematic. I don't know how else to explain that. I mean, maybe somebody else can explain it in different language, or I don't know.
Mr. Chair, appreciate that. I think there's a lot of merit in what Beth just said in terms of what we message to the public, identifying these projects. It's just, from a policy standpoint, it's an order in which the monies are used that come in. And there's an order that would indicate when these projects would be realized. And so that's more of a policy discussion, but I think there's a lot of merit in showing the public all these projects that the city and the region hope to accomplish with the monies that come in. If we just, what I'm hearing, I just want to say what I'm hearing from you, Mike, is you have communicated to us as a group the priority of the city as it relates to the categoricals. But that's using 100% of those funds. Plus, there's just not even enough money in there to take on that list. So that doesn't provide the flexibility that my council, my mayor has communicated to me. I think I heard from the board discussion that that's an element of interest for the board. So it's not 50%, because that's what we talked about 2 days ago. Is it 55%? Is it 60%? I mean, what is that number? And then let's start having a discussion on it.
Good point. Keep in mind, it's not just that category. It's the entire plan.
right, well, you told us we're only on page 2.
I'm solid looking at the entire plan and saying to you, we don't need all those. Give us some space back on the roadway or the corridor element. But there's no room there. So what I've done is I've said, okay, kind of boarded me off that island, so we're going to get on to this one.
I thought we moved past page 1.
Yeah, I said, we're doing it page at a time, and we're not on page 3.
Page 2 at the very top is part of page 1. So we're still kind of on page 1. Just should have been a lawyer. All I'm saying, Shane, is I hear you. And look, and by the way, Jeff did bring it up a good point last time about taking the contingency and deficits, and we did that. We're 47-ish%, 40s, 40%, which, I mean, that's a fair conversation. So again, I'm really trying to figure out a way to convey this in terms of the investment. And because of the lack of investment on the corridor side, I've got to be able to identify something on the other categories. That's kind of, let's go to Rod and then we'll get.
So I'm gonna head a little bit more down Shane's theme. where we've got to kind of narrow that number. And if we come to some percentage, would it be possible for the city to take their list of projects and rank them so that they could then sum up to a close enough value that would match that percentage? And then that would also identify the ones that were in excess that will be available for discussion later on. And that would allow that to put that ranked list in the language and in the publication.
Yeah.
Is that a possibility?
Short answer is yeah, that's not a concern at all. It really is where you draw the line.
Well, I'm trying to give a space where you can have a list, which it sounds like you.
I need a list. I need a list.
Exactly.
But I
But
need,
we need a flexibility to say that list varies.
I need a list, but I also need to know the amount. Because the amount goes back to the entire package of investment. That's really, Jerry, then.
So I think guys wearing tan jackets actually are on the same wavelength. So that's almost exactly what I was gonna say. I think we're right where it is you're asking us to be, which is name something in the categoricals, just like the county did. They named 2 projects. And I was gonna suggest the same thing. Take whatever the priorities are in this listed yellow and go down the list until you get to 47% or whatever that is. Maybe it's not 40%, whatever it is, right? So that there's and then you're showing people, and I don't even know why the number matters personally, because people aren't going to look at the number, they're going to look at the project. Is this project going to get done? Is my road going to be fixed? That's what they're looking at. Is it going to be widened? Is there going to be bike passes or whatever? That's what they're worried about. And then all of the other stuff, back to Beth's point, if all of the other stuff is listed as well, then people are seeing on the plan the things that the region is going to be doing, or hopefully doing, depending on if we get excess funds. So.
Yeah, I think I, like you, Mike, feel like we're going around the same mountain. And I thought when we left out of here last time, I thought we were really down to 2 things, and that was how much of regional funds get applied, and then what share of the safety and active transportation bucket gets named and what's unnamed. And so I recall, and Sam, you can verify, your list here under safety and active transportation is in priority order as of your last presentation of that information. So, I think again, if it's a number, understanding what that number is, I think would move us closer. And then we draw the line because they're in priority order. We add them up and then we draw the line and say, these are named plus the counties, Camino de la Canoa and White House Canyon, and the remainder of it is the unnamed portion of that. And whatever doesn't get named from the city then moves over into that next column that says if there's excess revenues.
Mike, can I just piggyback on that? I agree with Carmine, and just to be clear, the last iteration of this we saw had more or less a bucket. Now we're seeing these sub elements. That's a little bit confusing, and the numbers not adding up to the numbers we saw yesterday. But the way I understood we left things off yesterday was 35 million for South Tucson off the top, which left 210. And then of that 210, there was roughly 6 million for the 2 county projects, left about 204 left. And then we were having conversations of how do we split that 204 up? Was 50% of that going to be carved out for the city to be defined or undefined? And that's kind of where we left things. And that's my recollection.
So it was PAG staff that put this chart together. But I agree. Quite frankly, I had a hard time following the balances, the totals. Beth understood it a lot better than I did. But I do agree. The numbers that we were talking about yesterday in terms of those totals were a little different than what we have here. So I can't explain this.
So just to clarify, it's the 170 plus 86. 170 plus 86 is what's available for those 2 buckets.
let me throw this out. First, I feel like I'm looking
That
at
adds
the
the
road
green
plans, but I'm gonna get out of this corner. But let me suggest this. Let's take about a 5 minute break. Let me talk to staff. Got an idea. Let me throw it in. Take a 5 minute break. What was the? Their numbers. Okay, yeah.
What was the answer about? Transit not asking?
Those two.
Yeah.
are-
Good luck with that.
Been a while, though. Oh, man.
Board thing, hey, we still have to figure
Yeah.
out the breakdown of 610.
Yeah, those two roads are fine.
We love it.
36 years.
Get excited about them.
Never had a thing.
Undo. Well, just look, undo. Okay.
Undo.
All right, let's come back here. I'm gonna throw something out on the table here. Wait till we have everyone's attention. Or maybe I just do and then ask for motion and we're done.
I was gonna say, there's always that possibility of, somebody proposal out that one.
All right, here's what I'd like to suggest. I explained to you the need for Irvington to be back in the green column. So that's important. The projects, what I wanted to confirm was these projects are priority order. And they have been, so basically we start at the top and go down. These are City Tucson projects.
You're talking the yellow column, right?
Yeah, I'm talking about they'll get priority order. But the existing green column, I would suggest if you could move the yellow column to the green column in the amount of 150, that will put us, I'm sorry, 150,000 times. What that does is that'll equate to right at about 48 to 49% of the vote, not of that category, the whole program. That I think I can in good conscience go to my council and recommend approval of that. So that would be 60 million over to 60 million for the Irvington. I want to make sure we're there, and 150 million of the safety and active, I believe safety and active.
That would leave 46 million for the region.
That's correct. That's correct. So that's my suggestion at this point.
150, 60.
Mr. Chair, can I get a point of clarity? Is that calculation based on the 238 total for that column?
Yes.
Okay, my math must be different than yours. I gotta double check that for some.
No, the yellow column's more.
Okay,
The projects that are listed in the yellow are more than that. I understand. There were in excess of 200, as I recall.
okay. So then what did
What I'm
you get?
suggesting is we would take the top number up to 150, move them into the green column. The remainder would continue to be prioritized projects for us to come out of the excess revenue.
Okay,
And what was your remainder, Shane? About 40 is left for the region?
That's the balance of 46 million for the region.
I'm not sure. Do the math for me on it.
I just did.
It's walking through.
Well, add the 174 and the 86.1 together, that gives you 256.5. You take 60 million out for Irvington, that leaves 196.5. You put 150 out, it leaves 46.5.
And Farhad, if I look at the bottom of sheet 3, the cost, but the request total was about 12 million, 13 million short of the target 246, correct? So we had a tiny amount of cushion to play with.
Like, he used that cushion that's included in that cushion.
Included in his number,
Yep.
okay.
So that's where I'm at. You asked for a number, that's my number. And that gets us like just shy of 50%.
Well, and I'm sorry.
No, and gets us just shy of 50%, which will be an unpleasant conversation for me, but I'm willing to do that. Because I think that given the excess revenue conversation, and my confidence in that, I think we'll be okay. That's my opinion.
Michael, if we were to look at adding that 150 million, so you again get lead 46, can we revisit the additional cap? I mean, I think if you're gonna get, it's another.
We're gonna get to that.
But I mean, I would not be as supportive of the next 300 going to the city if we've added 150 in this.
Not adding 150.
Yeah,
We're allocating 100.
You're real, yes. Correct. adding it to the city side.
Mr. Chair, it gets to a point that I think I made, 2 days ago when we met. I was struggling with, allocating a portion of the categorical bucket to the city of Tucson, plus giving Tucson 100% of the excess. So, you know, if Tucson, I don't know exactly where I would land on this, but if Tucson is asking for a delineated portion of the bucket on the base, then I would think that would require a conversation about what that excess looks like in terms of allocation to the city.
I understand where you guys are hung up. I really do. My challenge is that I'm looking at the entirety of the program as what that number is and what that investment is. That's about 48.9%. That's going to be a challenge for me. I'm just telling you. And so the way that I can overcome that is by suggesting the excess revenue will get us closer to bigger percentage that would rather than the. I understand what you're telling me. It's not lost on me.
Right.
I'm just trying to explain to you, and I've been very open, and I've said it 20 different ways, and I don't know how else to say it to you. That's the challenge. And I think, you know, back to when we started, you know, that's why I put these projects there. You know, if we had more on page 1, we would be having this same conversation, be different. Nothing different.
I guess one of my concerns with shifting all those main categoricals into the green, especially as that dollar amount is city has already committed that they're going to be finishing the first projects and the current RTA projects using Sam's number in the first 5 years. And then there's 8 named Florida projects and then $150 million worth of categorical named projects. Yeah, my concern is all of them will be delivered and how do all those get delivered? That just the sheer dollar value is more than the city has delivered in any single 1 year last years. How do we get back in?
Great question. I've got absolute confidence in the ability to deliver that. Let's go to Jeff.
Okay. No, I mean, what I think that if we put the 150 in like that, the conversation then on the excess, Mike, what I've been hearing, if we do 150 or that almost 50% on the categorical, the excess, I know you've been saying 50, 57, somewhere in that range, a higher percentage of the excess go to the city. But it maybe it's in the 60% range. The first 60% goes to the city as far as any excess. I mean, something to consider. But I think what you're saying, you want to have it listed. Seems like it accommodates that. It gives us some flexibility, at least for the region, on that safety category. The excess gives a higher percentage to the city than the region, but it makes at least a commitment. It's not listing it. But I think we'll have to back off all the excess to the city. But if it's in that, maybe it's 55, 60% range, what's that do for you?
Take that, Jeff. My gut is that that's reasonable. And part of my hesitation in not identifying the projects or an amount is because of what Beth started the conversation with, which is the delivery of the 06 program is part of the challenge for me, because those are all city projects and not delivering them in the 06 is something we're going to have to explain. And that has been a bugaboo, if you will, for my folks. And so the specificity is important, I think. And so, although I appreciate the process in that, it does concern me to not have specific projects listed. With regard to your question more specifically, we can talk about that. That's on page 3, and we can talk about that here in a bit. Because I do think that there's a conversation to be had as to what that excess revenue looks like. And maybe it goes up to a point as the cap, if you will, and not above that or something. Last thing I'll leave you with on that is, I mentioned last time, if we identify projects or a pot within the categoricals, I would suggest that we would forego anything else in those categories. You know, to go without saying, but I want to say it so everybody's clear. We would not be at the table necessarily asking for additional dollars in those categoricals going forward in that original budget amount. Yeah.
So coming back to the excess, that let's assume for a moment that we agree on shifting that 150 into that. And we're 10 years into the program and we have, and our projections are looking like there are excess funds. But everything in the green has to be delivered before we start talking about how we're programming those excess funds. So a city has all these projects programmed in the green, and we're showing that, hey, we have excess funds. How does the rest of the region then just has to sit here on our hands and wait until the city has finished all their green projects and then starts on their excess projects before anybody else can tap into any of that excess money? And if, to Jan's point, let's say the next, 150 million goes to the city, we're all just sitting here waiting until the city finishes all the green projects and then $150 million yellow projects, even if we're showing that we have that money coming in, the money's just sitting in the bank at that point. Nobody else can do anything.
It's a great point, except I don't know that, my expectation that all of those projects would be included. Everybody else is working on theirs. I think we're talking about revenue coming in. And once the revenue reaches an amount, those dollars are earmarked. Excess revenue continues down the path and other folks are able to utilize those dollars. So I'm not equating that to a linear finish and then start. I'm thinking this revenues are established, goes through the process for project development. As revenues continue to come in, those revenues are then used as we determine.
The one thing I would say is talking about the concern that the bucket is now much smaller. We set those buckets and we still have ability to be flexible because we put those like the contingency index. We feel that 46 million isn't enough. What is enough that everyone feels comfortable and where else can we pull it? I mean, we're not set, we're not tied to that.
Thank you, Liz. Hey, Jeff, you had your hand up. Did you have another comment?
Yeah, I did. So, I mean, I think to Beth's point, when we talk about what about 50% going to Tucson on the categorical, that still means doesn't mean the first dollar, it doesn't mean the other 50% is available to the region. And now, granted, I wouldn't want to use bonding for categoricals by any means. But I think it doesn't mean the first dollars are to the city of Tucson. It means it's an allocation. So it's almost a 50-50. Tucson and then the rest goes to the region. That's the way I would understand it.
I would agree. I guess that we're saying similarly. I was thinking more on the revenue side than the delivery side.
So, Mr. Chair, Jeff keeps referring to 50% allocation, 50-50. That's not what's being proposed.
Are you suggesting, yeah, just so that we're clear, when I say it's about 49%, that's 49% of the total 2.46, not the categoricals.
Jeff.
I see what you're saying. Well, the 150 plus about 46, whatever that ratio is. So I see what you're saying. It's
76% of the bucket.
right. So the other percentage though would be available to the region from the original dollars. I don't think it's the first percentage goes to Tucson. I think it's still an allocation, annual allocation that still goes to the region.
We need to define that. We define that.
Well, I'd like a point of clarification. Mr. Chair, from Farhat. So Beth, in her comments, was suggesting that there's an order in which projects can be done. The green projects named in the green column, for the sake of this discussion, have to be done before you can jump into the excess capacity. So if we see brighter days as a region and we've got excess dollars coming in, is it in fact the case that all of the green projects have to be done in that category before we can start tapping and utilizing excess funds?
So we touched on it on Monday, the policy recommendation, and I think there was some level of understanding would be to every 5 years, look back, come up with a estimated excess funding, release that amount for the following 5 years, and then continue doing that every 5 years.
Sure. So that's on the acknowledgement of excess monies, but in terms of using those excess monies, do all of the projects in the green column have to be done before you can start utilizing the excess monies?
Again, from a policy perspective, I think I'm more comfortable with every 5 years project and release those funds. So by definition, the green projects don't have to be completed. No.
So I would answer a little differently, I think, Shane. So first and foremost, we talked very generally about the check-in, but we didn't come up with anything in terms of the 5 years.
I agree.
Yeah, we come back to that here in a minute. But back to your point, I think it's an excellent one. If I were really pushing this forward, I would suggest that the green column mostly be completed within the phases before we start other projects. I would say that very directly because that's what the green column is what we promised to vote. And so we want to make sure that is in hand and we've got a game plan for it before we're really looking at other projects. Now, that's not to say that the entirety of the program has to be complete and then start the yellow column. But I do think that in that check-in, we should make sure that those green projects find back in hand, that we've got a game plan, we've got funding for them before we're talking about the excess. We'll call it the yellow.
So it feels to me like we're getting further and further apart. And so we're talking now about taking the yellow list of items and putting them into the categoricals to the tune of about 80% of the budget is going to be taking up the categoricals. So my sense is, strong sense is that my mayor would not support that relative to the issue of flexibility in the plan. The other thing that I have a concern is, I think it's been expressed by a number of people, and that is we're taking a majority of these in the yellow, the city of Tucson's, going all the way down, if I calculated right, down to about line 68 here, and putting it into the green category. And then we're also saying that when there's excess money, the city of Tucson is going to get at least 50% or 60% of that. When you only have an additional 3 or 4 projects to complete. So the whole point of saying that we're going to have this excess money and that's going to go to the city of Tucson was for the purpose of you being able to get these projects into the plan. But then we're turning around and saying, well, we're going to take care of 80% of that in the categoricals. And now we're going to also give you more than half of the money in the excess money. So I have a real problem with that. I think 46 million for the rest of the region in the categoricals and half of the money, if there's excess, going to the city of Tucson or more. I don't see that that's a fair distribution of the monies.
Understood.
So, Mr. Chair, I think there's a little bit of apples and oranges here. Because, so one of the things we can't add, that the board can't add, is they can't add more named roadway projects. So when we're talking about anything in the green, let's start with the named roadway projects. That's kind of a different deliverable than a categorical project. That when we're taking, and I'm just assuming, you know, that we haven't agreed on a timeline on the check-in, but that when we're checking in on, at those 5-year marks, that, you know, we check in at that first 5 years and we say, hey, we've collected $50 million more than we had anticipated. Let's release that to the region. I guess my desire for that would be that, like, let's say we gave the city that 150 million, leaving 46 million for everybody else. But if in that first 5 years, that 46 million was used up by the other players in the region, that 50 million would go to backfill into that categorical, that the green projects in the name categories versus projects in the categoricals are kind of two different things. Again, it's two different buckets. So having all the named roadway projects done, I mean, that's not how we do things now, that we do categoricals, I don't want to say necessarily on the fly, but kind of on the fly. You know, as they're needed, we pitch them to the TPC or the UMC, that we can all be working on those named roadway projects. But, you know, going back to that concern I expressed earlier, is that we could say, hey, we've collected, you know, this excess money, we want to release it to the region, but there's nowhere to release it to. So you really want to be releasing it to that categorical.
So Beth, I understand, and I'm going to come back to Terry's point as well. I understand. What I remember is the reason that I have been laser focused on identifying the projects in categoricals. It's because the city of Tucson didn't get enough, to use your word, fair investment on the corridor. And so the only way that I can then explain it is to show projects. We can deliver them however we deliver them, but I've got to be able to show the investment in those categoricals. So back to your point, Terry, that's what I was saying when we were talking about the corridor element, is the fairness of that when the city gets these projects at a much lesser percentage. And I said at that time, I'll repeat it again, then I will look at the categoricals and look at where we get and how we can define that, so I can demonstrate to the residents of Tucson when that investment occurs. It's the same thing, but in a business.
And for the sake of argument,
What to argue?
that let's say I agree that let's give this city that 150 million, giving that 46, that if at that 5-year check-in that there's additional funds, the city still has their projects listed. And if we have excess funds, that means the funding is available for any of those projects that the city wants to keep moving forward. My concern would be that the city saying, well, even though we're delivering all our projects, that we're not gonna let anybody have that excess to use until we finish everything else. So I guess, I don't know that I would necessarily have a problem with saying, hey, you could have that 150 if we have that assurance that while you're delivering everything else, that if there are excess funds, that those could be used for projects that are in the works.
So the exact hesitation you have, the exact hesitation I have on the other side. When you say we have a process, you know, to identify projects and fund them going forward, I want specificity. Now, I will also tell you that I have no issue with the allocation of dollars in the categoricals as opposed to the projects. We'll figure out the project. I'll go back and I'll list them. That's a conversation I can have internally. It's the dollar amount that I'm focused on. And by the way, I do have a little bit of an issue with the language that was in the, not a motion, but one of the pieces, and we'll come back to that in a minute. But because it was not my intent that these dollars would only go, the excess revenue would only go to the categoricals, which had said in the motion, that was not my understanding. What I suggested is the mayor and council would weigh in on how those dollars were allocated within the plan as a whole, not necessarily specific to categoricals. I want to make sure that that's clear, because I noticed that on the language there. So Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, just listening to everyone, again, if that 150 million of the categorical goes to Tucson, that other 46 million that would go to the region every 5 years, or, I just divided 20 years by 4. And that means 11.5 million would be available to the region. And if we're all comfortable with that, we probably should have some language that just says that at least every 5 years, 11.5 million is going to go to the region. So we need to work it somehow to where that's that's at least a guarantee to the region, that it hopefully appease that we're not earmarking everything to Tucson. It's addressing Tucson's issue as far as getting closer to what they'd like. So can we somehow, maybe this question is for Farhad, can we somehow put some language in that in the motion or in the ballot, whatever, the commitment that at least 11.5 million goes to the region every 5 years?
Sure, if I understand the question correctly, you're talking about the buckets in the green column. So,
Yeah, so this was specifically the safety,
correct.
specifically the safety element. Yeah.
So yeah, those buckets, I think we can have policy to distribute those buckets based on periods, and we can even have that estimate. The estimate for available funds for each bucket is $11 million per period, something along those lines.
Yeah, and that 11.5 million was the amount that would go to the region, and not necessarily Tucson, but I think this allows Tucson to list their projects, guarantees the region dollars in each of the 5 years, and we're not just waiting. So does that sound?
Under the administrative code can have that additional language in there, and obviously the board will adopt that document. So I think that'll meet the intent of what you're suggesting.
Okay.
And Jeff, just to add, I think it also could and probably even should include that the city of Tucson would forego any of that 11.5 million in lieu of the 150. So
It's a good point. That's a good point, Mike.
that's there any interest or opportunity to talk about the debt service or the contingency?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I wanted to bring up that exercise we did on Monday with shifting the implementation periods and looking to see how our cash flow analysis looked. We were going to look at the assumptions. Right now we're at 77 million. If we look at that exercise, is there a possibility, since we shifted some of those implementation periods, to drop the debt service?
Any interest on the part of the community?
If I may respond to that. So yes, we did run the model. The 77 million actually gives us that flexibility to be able to deliver those projects. So thanks again for shifting those projects. Without shifting those projects, 77 wasn't going to work. Now, can you reduce that? We got to play with it more to see if we can reduce it, but I'm comfortable with 77 and the flexibility it provides to deliver some of these larger projects, because that's the size of the project matters too, and that's the concern.
Is there any interest on the part of the board?
Yeah, I'd just like to see that. If we can get it, just something sent up to it. Part of what we were looking at is where we went negative. So the remodeling, make sure that we're all looking at it.
Yeah, I'll send out a memo again, but the
I just need a
77.
chart, don't need a memo.
Okay,
So are you,
the 77 chart we have, I'll pull that up here in a second.
so there's not an interest I'm hearing other than to look at the cash flow on that, on the debt service amount?
Can you pull up that, it's in the present, next slide.
Anyone?
There we go. So again, we use both the CAC plan as well as the TMC plan. And since we were talking about the Sahuarita proposal pretty much resembles the CAC plan. In both cases, you'll have positive cash flow. And again, with the TMC plan, as we discussed last time, you get into a negative cash flow at the end, and that was because of that over programming a bit, but with other changes, it'll work out.
But to Bob's question and point, is there another scenario to reduce the debt service? Change the cash flow to reduce the debt service, and is there a scenario like that?
Again, potentially we
To
could,
what end?
yeah, exactly,
To feed it into.
exactly. It's-
Off the board.
So I would say if there's additional flexibility to remove projects, then that would be accommodated easily. So 77 was really the sweet spot.
We're not removing, though, we're just.
No, scheduling, I'm sorry, phasing.
So I'm sensing not much of an appetite for reducing the debt service, is that what I'm hearing? So,
Yeah, I was just gonna ask the question. Last time we met, we talked about no jurisdiction opted to have their projects in period 4. Is that correct?
Well, you made changes at the last meeting.
We made changes, but not, I mean, I didn't hear like a whole bunch of projects moved to period 4. So this assumes
What?
little to no projects in period 4.
This is with the proposed changes, yes.
We had 3 identified, right? That was over 100 million. But they went to 3 and 4.
So all the recommended changes on Monday are reflected in here.
Okay, I understand that, Farhad. I'm gonna be more specific with my question. How many projects are in period 4?
Currently,
And would there be an opportunity for some period 3 projects to shift to period
you guys
4?
can answer that question. What did you move to period 4? I don't recall.
Okay,
Russell
we
Cave.
shifted from 2-3 to
2-3.
3-4.
There you go. That's.
That was it?
I think that's it, yeah.
This only takes into account one project being delivered in period 4?
And it's a large project, yes.
Understood.
Keep in mind, that's the $157 million.
Yeah.
All right. Someone's beating the door down, I assume that we'll leave for now, the. debt
Mike, on that?
service. Oh, go ahead.
Before you leave off that topic, I noticed on this green spreadsheet, we've got a total for the administrative services and debt service of 121.66, but on the material from Monday, it was 110. What changed?
Yep, so by statute, 1% of the revenue has to be set aside for administrative costs. Since we upped the revenue, that's a formula in the spreadsheet, it just bumped that up. And then you obviously have the Main Street program, which is a fixed $10 million.
Does the statute say it has to be or up to?
Nope, required 1%.
Required 1% administration?
Yep.
Farhad, this is another area where a row is hidden, so you're missing the detail. If you take the 2 numbers shown there, they don't total the 121.6.
Yeah, sorry, again, that's for some reason, some of those rows are collapsed. I don't know why, but yes, but the totals are correct.
So, let's move to the excess revenue position. So to be open with you about what the goal is, at least from where I sit, is to figure out program-wide in the 20th year that the city has received an investment of about 58%. That's been the number that's been rattling around in my head. Okay. And how we get there, and I have been open to conversations about excess revenue and figuring out. But that's why the base is so important, because it provides the foundation for us to grow. Now, we can probably all run numbers for that. And does it have to be exactly 58% on year 20? I don't know. That's just been the conversation. You saw the numbers. You know what is generated in the city. I'm not naive to that. I understand that the generation of sales tax is a function of people shopping versus where they spend their money versus from where they live and so forth. I understand all that. That was the goal that I had established when we started this 10 years ago now. Back to Jeff's point, I understand the allocation, and I think Terry, you had it as well, the allocation, actually all did not, of 150 million to the categoricals is a challenge, but then get the excess revenue on top of that. I'm open to suggestions on how we carve up that excess revenue so that over time, and the risk is quite frankly totally on me, right? It's totally on the city of Tucson. How do we get there? Jeff had suggested on an annual basis or on an objective basis, percentage goes to the city, percent goes to the region. What I was thinking initially was all to the city to some point and shared to give us a higher likelihood of getting some of the investments in the projects completed. We can talk through that. I'm just being open and honest with you all. It's kind of that simple for me. I don't know how else to say
Yeah, and
it.
everybody here has to go back to a board too, right? So. we
I'm
get it.
clear, but right now you all are in a better position than I am. So I'm trying to figure out
Counties.
how we get,
Oh.
well, I don't disagree. with you.
So I said, I think about 20 minutes ago, I can understand moving the 150 million, if that's what we want to do. And then I would cap instead of 300 million, I cap it at 150. And then that's the cap, and then we come back to have a conversation.
Sure. I mean, to that point, we were talking about the excess revenue being 298.4. And so what we've discussed now since then is a total of 211 million going to 60 million going to Irvington, right? And 150 million, 151 million, right? Going to the city in the categoricals. So if you take that, that's 211 million. So the 298.4 minus 211 million, that leaves 87.4 million, right? So if pretty.
No, that's not what I'm saying at all. What I've said is of the 238 million or whatever the number is for the safety. I think
Can I go through that real quick?
Yeah, please do. So it's not good.
So taking the 170.4 million plus the 86.1 million gives us a 256.5 million. And they're marked 60 million of that for Irvington. So leave a total of 196.5 million. City of Tucson is requesting 76% of that at $150 million. That would leave a balance of 46.5 million.
Right, but what I'm saying, that wasn't how I was getting at, right? We were talking about how do we divvy up the overage, right?
Yeah.
If we're over. So I was laying out a concept, a framework for how we might have that discussion. So if we rewind all the way back, we were talking about 298 million going to the city of Tucson. If you subtract out of that number what's been applied to Irvington and what has been applied then to the categoricals, that's 211 million. So then when we talk about where do we cap the amount that the city gets in the overage, a starting point for that discussion is the 87.4 million. It's the difference between you getting 100% of the overage versus getting the overage minus what you're getting up front in Irvington and the categorical. So
I'm clear, Carmine. What I'm saying to you though is the conversation with the voter is going to be that column. That yellow column is going to be off.
I don't think it has to be though.
No, I hear you. But here's what I'm saying. The 47% or 49% that I was talking about assumes in the green column, 150 million.
I'm saying move that over.
I understand. But what I'm saying to you then is that 49 to 30% drops pretty significantly. If I'm shifting that over to the future revenue. And what I'm trying to do is understand what the base plan includes for the city of Tucson. Now, if you're saying to me, move them over, fine. Then what of the green column and the categoricals will be allocated to the city of Tucson? Back to Beth's point, well, we got a process for that. I'm good with that. Love you guys. I want to see what it is. I want to know what that number is in the plan. That's what
For
I'm saying.
discussion's sake, I'm saying, right, you move them into the green column up to 151 million. Irvington gets funded, right? The city projects in the categoricals up to 151 million get moved over. then the ones that are above that 151 million,
Future.
they get left off. And we're talking about future. And so what I'm suggesting is previously we were talking about all of the excess revenue going to the city of Tucson, 298. So if you account for, we funded Irvington in the plan, we funded 151 million of your categoricals in the plan, then that leaves for discussion. If we go back to the 298, $87.5 million roughly. So when we talk about how do we allocate the overage, right? That I think is a starting point to say the city gets X% of the overage up to, right, the maximum of 87.4 million. And then then we're back reset again. And I don't know, is it 100% of the overage until you hit 87.4 million? Is it 50% of the overage until you hit 87.4 million? But what you were getting before was the 298. So I'm suggesting you shouldn't get more than the 298. You're getting front loaded 211 million of that included in the plan.
But what I'm saying to you, and maybe this will we're disconnected. I have to count, if you will, what is in the green column. What's in the green column, no, I understand, but what was in the green column comes to about 48, 49%. Got it, I'm clear. But if then you say I get 87 million, that's not even close to the 58% I was talking about earlier. And so what I was trying to get to is the base for it in the green column starts at 49, about 49%.
This is where we're bouncing back between dollars and percentages,
Right.
and this is what's stripping us up, right? We kind of inch closer to getting there on one of those two aspects. And then when we layer in the other one and, we do the math or, whatever we use to calculate it, all I'm saying is what was in the green column plus 289 or 298, right? Supposedly made the city whole. That's where.
That's correct.
Right. So, okay,
Yeah.
so that number doesn't change. And in fact, you're getting more upfront in the plan. We've added more in the plan, 211 million more in the plan than before.
Show me how that's true. Because if you look at the green column without the 150, forget about the 298. Without the 150, tell me how much you're gonna get out of the categoricals.
Well, we're taking it from my understanding, if I'm tracking right, is
you're
we're
right.
taking
Right.
money out of the categoricals. We're taking 60 million out of safety and active transportation and we're funding Irvington.
Okay.
That's in the plan.
Okay.
We are then moving X number of projects up to 151 million
Okay.
of safety and active transportation into the plan
Got it.
from those dollars. And then there's 46 million remaining for the region. So then if before what was in the plan plus 298 made you whole-ish, right? That's still the case. There's more, there's 211 more in the plan. And then the delta is then 87.4 million.
Where I think what I'm falling down is the delta is not 87. I understand how you did the math. The math makes sense. But my argument or my defense of this was to go over it and say, here is the base. 49%, I'm gonna pick a number, okay? I don't have to use percentages, pick the actual dollar. Right? That's in, we'll call it the green column. In addition to that, we are guaranteed-ish to get the first whatever number, which then equates to another percentage. And I can say, hey, we're golden with that, I'm ready to go. What you've done is you've decreased the excess pretty significantly by more than a third, right? Or 2/3 rather. And so what I'm saying is that's not going to get me there.
Because we front end loaded.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I 100% on the same wavelength here as Carly, right? Yeah, because he has
Close enough.
So we're giving you all the money up front, but you get virtually every single one of the projects that you think you need to get in front of your voters to be approved. Every single bit of it gets approved. All the projects, all the way down to
66.
all the way down to line 66 are in the plan. And then the funding that comes from any excess
goes to you, the first 87 million.
Yeah.
Goes to you guys to get the rest of your, nobody else in this room is getting all of the things that they want in the plan, except for you guys. So when you talk about 58%, now just a second, and you've mentioned it over and over again, 58%. You're not 58% of the population in Pima County. And the people that are coming and spending money, and you alluded to it, the people that are coming and spending money in your community are coming from Pima County, and they're coming from South Rita, and they're coming from Berea. Most places you can't go buy a car. Where are most people buying cars? They're buying them here. Is that a large percentage of tax revenue? Absolutely it is. So we keep spinning our wheels on this thing. And quite frankly, Carmine hit the nail on the head. If we can't go forward from here where we're at, I think we're done.
Bottom line is you're looking at the total and and as a city, you're saying if there's not an allocation of 58% of that total to the city, you're gonna have problems. That's what you're saying.
In the end.
Yeah, I'm just looking at bottom line.
But not here, the path to get to the end, which is going through the excess revenue.
But
But I believe you get there, right? Because if just on the basis that the combination of what was in the plan previously plus the 298 got you where you needed to be ish, right?
Yes, but you're making an assumption that what was in the plan, the 150 is on top of it. And it's not.
Yes, it is. It's on top because the way this was laid out, right? What Sarita included in their proposal was moving out all those safety and active transportation projects. And what we've discussed today, and it sounds like there's agreement on, is moving 151 million of those projects back into the plan and funding Irvington. And funding Irvington. So
But you're making it sound, Carmine, like the 150 million is in addition to, it's not, it's part of the categorical. What am I missing?
but you're getting it specified.
50 more?
Before today, there was no expectation that all of those were going to be moved into the excess funds. That showed up today for the first time. So now all of a sudden that was.
that was presented on Monday.
We missed that.
50-50.
We missed that, because that was not the additional,
That was what our,
Yeah.
So that's where the discussion started when we were here on Monday. Then we did migrate to saying, Mike, you said, hey, that doesn't work for us, right? And then we had a conversation and saying, okay, of that amount that was in safety and active transportation, you fund City of South Tucson, you include the 2 county projects. That left a dollar amount, right, of 204 million. Can we split that? Could we split that 50-50?
Right.
And that would have been 102 to the city. So you're up from where we left off the last time, right? You're up to 150, right? So you held on to Irvington. That was a discussion, and we were talking previously about using regional funds there, but that got replaced today with using categorical funds. So you're whole on Irvington. And whereas last time we were talking about the city getting 102 million of those safety and active transportation projects moved into the named column, you're up to 151 million. And I just keep coming back to my simple, look at this. If what was in the plan plus the 298 made it work for you, then now there's more in the plan. So then you get less of the 298. That's all.
I'm good with that. Except for if you add up what was in the plan and the 298, it's not what you just outlined. I'm telling you.
No, but it wasn't in this plan. I think that's where we're getting hung up because
that's the witness stuff.
So in the Sarita proposal, right, they had moved all of the safety and active transportation projects out of the plan. That was into the overage column, and so was Irvington. And so now you've got 151 million of your categoricals in the plan. So there's a handful, looks like a half dozen that don't make it into the plan. And if you look at them, 26, 36, 46, 66. Okay, so then that starts getting bigger, 106. Okay, so that's, I was gonna say, that may be somewhere relative to the 87 million, but so is that what we're talking about? Is that what we're talking about, that you need a reservation potentially? Instead of only being 87.4 million, are you seeking a reservation of whatever this total is right here?
92 million and some change.
67 on.
Okay, so it's 26 million, 10, 10, 20, 40. I don't think that's right. 26, 36, 46, and 20, that's 86.
26 is included in the,
Oh, 26 is included. Okay, my apologies.
actually,
All right,
18 of the 26.
That's.
Let me help you
I
with
cut
that.
it before then.
Let me help you with that.
Yeah.
So I mean, is that what we're talking about? You need a reservation greater than the 87 point?
I don't know what we're talking. What I'll do is we will go through and we'll add up those projects that I can confidently say to the mayor and council that are investments in the city of Tucson in the green column. Okay. I think that's going to come to, on the dollar amount, I apologize, 48 to 49% excluding contingency and
Debt service.
debt service. Good with that. Okay, I can suggest that. But now, and what I was going to suggest was knowing that the 298 was going to go to the city, that gets us, assuming it comes in, which is unknown. I could say to the council, hey, I think this is a good opportunity to demonstrate to the voter the investment. That's where I was headed. But I also knew that if I don't have the green, if you will, identified, that would be problematic. Now, if you're telling me that 298 drops to 87 and 92, whatever the number is, fine, I'll put that in there. But that number, that percentage would be very low, lower than it would have been with 300. And again, I understand the concern. I understand the concern of the entirety of it going to the city. I do. I'm not, that's not lost on me. And I'm suggesting that we split that over time. That was my suggestion.
My God, I just, the math calculation of what you're suggesting doesn't line up with what I believe we were talking about before.
Okay.
That's where I think we're missing each other in the conversation here. Because it was a total, when we started the day, we were talking about whatever dollars were allocated to city projects in the plan, plus 298. That's what we were talking about. And that was good. So now you've got more dollars in the plan. You've got more dollars in the plan, $211 million more in the plan, right? So then we're reducing the 298 by 211 million. The total amount you're getting is the same. So I don't see how I'm lost on how the percentages change in just simple math.
Very.
And Carmine, you're actually assuming, so previously, the city was taking a risk that we would come in at an amount higher. And then all of these projects would hopefully get funded because we're gonna get more than we expect. We're coming around, rallying around you, and we're saying, you know what? We're even willing to do this, to guarantee 150 million of those projects by putting it into the categorical. So now your risk level to get all of these things is much less, right? So now you only have about 25 or 30% of these projects that aren't going to be covered guaranteed. And we're saying of the 298 million that might come in, hopefully comes in, you're only going to get 87 million or 90 million of that, right? But we might only come in 100 million over. And then you've got it at all. Or not at all. Or not at all. And so if we come in at 92 million, guess what? You get 100% of it.
I think
So we're hedging on, okay, well, let's give the city what they need in order to get this thing through. And then hopefully there is some extra revenue and we can benefit from that down the road. But, you know, I'll go back to it. You're wanting all of this up front, and then you're wanting the guarantee that you're gonna get all these other things in the end as well. And Mike, I just don't think that that's fair.
I understand what it looks like. So let me suggest it a different, maybe you can help. Both of you said it multiple times. You said that you're adding $150 million to the categorical. You're earmarking, right?
Right.
Okay.
Allocated.
But before, all of those City of Tucson projects were listed to be funded out of the 298,
Yes.
right? Everybody clear on that? That's what I'm hearing. Potentially, yeah, if it comes, I understand. How much of it, assuming that that is the case, how much of the green column would have been allocated to the City of Tucson in that scenario?
It was open.
Yeah,
It was,
we
it was 100, it was 196, there's 196.5 million that was open for the region to go through the process.
Including the city.
Including the city, the region, everybody, we would go through the process of petitioning for 196 million.
That's the disconnect. That right there is a disconnect. Because when we left, I thought we was 102 million allocated to the city. Remember that last conversation we had right before?
And we did have that conversation.
I understand. So in my head, there was already 102 that was allocated in the green column.
No.
Well, no.
Well,
we did that.
but the allocation was so that you could name some projects that are over here and put them in the category.
So it's not 102 allocation, we're saying it's 150 million
I
allocation.
understand. I'm clear.
We never
But
quite
the
got there,
difference-
right? Jeff had suggested at the end saying, okay, if we're gonna allocate named projects in safety and active transportation to the city, we need to come back and we need to revisit then the overage discussion. And that's what we're having here today.
I understand. The disconnect, I think fundamentally, is what you just said. The 196, in my head, 102 of that was already included for the City of Tucson for these named projects to be put into that category.
But I think you left off saying, hey, that doesn't meet our needs. Let us go back and figure out what we need.
Absolutely. So I was thinking that was what we had, the way we left it. And when I saw this, what it did is it shifted everything back into the 390. I understand.
I agree with you, right? This change in format has caused us all to have to reorient ourselves and
I got it.
that has burned up a bunch of our time.
I got it, and I apologize for being down. All I'm suggesting,
No, look,
all I'm suggesting is, I understand I'm clear. I will assure you, and I haven't run the numbers, but we'll do that. With the 150 million allocated, as we've talked about, and the 60 million allocated, that's gonna get me to between 48 and 49% of the 2.46, excluding contingency and investments.
and with the promise, right, that overages come to you up to a certain dollar amount.
I understand. So I'll run the number to see what that over, because I had run the number at 300 million or 298. And the number came to about 54, 55%. But I'll run the number again at 92 million, I guess is what it is.
Because I think on Monday you said that of the
That's what-
stuff that was in the plan, right, funded named projects, I think you said it was 42%. Did I hear that right?
It was because.
So now we're up to 49, right? We don't,
No, I don't change numbers like that.
no, I'm saying
Not
we
like that.
added more that increased it to
No,
49.
No, you didn't. All you did was, Jeff, at the very end, said, take out contingency and debt service. So I did that. That brought it up to about 46, 47%. So today, today we've added a couple. So I'm just letting you know that's where that came from. So Jeff's point was a good one, and I took those out, the calculation. So I just didn't want you to think I was trying to.
Yeah, and I think just in terms of the word we choose, right, and saying we didn't do anything, I think we're making every effort to try and move closer to what you're seeking. And I'm sensing that we're not even gonna get to a place of being able to act on something, and we're gonna stick a pin in this and come back at some future date, which is disappointing me personally. But it's not an accurate characterization, say we didn't do anything. I think a lot was accomplished here today.
I don't think that I said that or I implied that.
Oh, you just-
I'm,
you
I'm,
just
no, no, but you
Okay.
suggested that somehow that magically changed
I'm-
because of numbers that I did.
No, Mike, you're
All right.
misunderstanding what I was saying is that whatever percentage we left off with
I understand.
last time, that percentage is greater as a result of adding $211 million into city named projects.
I apologize, you're right.
Okay.
Well, I thought you were saying I went
No,
from
no,
40.
no, absolutely not.
I apologize, I misunderstood. So recap.
Jeff has.
Did you want to?
Oh, sorry, Jeff, excuse me, Jeff, I apologize.
Mike, I'm not sure if you're including the deferred projects. There's certain deferred projects into your calculation too. But,
No, I'm not.
okay. But I mean, if you take the deferred projects out also, or at least the Tucson portion, include that in your benefit, that might change your calculation also. But
I appreciate that, and I will tell you, I can't do that. We brought that up before. That is problematic for us because those were part of the 06 bond and supposed to be taken off the top. And I even think that the motion that General Maxwell made said that it would not go for all the
well,
reasons.
I guess what I'm getting at is from the percentage basis, just to stay apples to apples, that you need to include that. If you're including it in the bottom dollar number that you're doing your ratio, your percentage, you got to include that as far as a benefit. Otherwise, you got to take it out.
Yeah, you just got off from that. Yeah, I appreciate that, Jeff.
Mr. Chair.
I guess if we're just at it seems like to me, we're at the last decision. As far as how much are we going to share of the excess revenues?
That's where we are.
What's the percentage on that? And I think it's really incumbent on Tucson to bring us a dollar amount and a percentage. And and I don't know if you're ready to do that here within the next hour or so. Maybe we take a break and you bring that to us and maybe we can close this out for tomorrow, for the board meeting for tomorrow.
Can we take about a 5-minute break? Let's make it 10. Let's take a 10-minute break. Before 92 million is what we all have computed is left. That's we gotta have tax number.
38 number minus 150.
All right, we just.
Yeah, if that's
90 million.
that's bad.
So
90
then
million.
I really did 68.
Guess we shouldn't have had the good snacks. That's where they conglomerate.
Yeah. Happens to us, I appreciate it. They're using our money to buy snacks.
I was gonna say, that came out of your allocation, by the way.
Everything else?
You see the lunch we got provided.
And I appreciate everybody's patience. Staff gave me water and out of my head now a little bit. Here's a thought. What I'd like to suggest is maybe it'll help a little bit. Sam, I asked Sam to run some numbers for us. Could you tell me or tell the group what the percentage is? The Irvington Road project is put back in, and 150 million is allocated from the safety and active transportation, with the other assumptions that are listed here, transit and so forth. What percentage does that equate to for the city of Tucson?
For that scenario, we are looking at 47.26%.
47.2%. Okay. And assuming that the revenue, the excess revenue of 92 million, I use 90 million. It's a different number. It's fine. It's in the 90 range. Off of that excess revenue goes to the city. What is that percentage? So basically, what you've already done plus the first 92 beyond, what is that number, that percentage?
Give me 1 second.
Or 88 or 80 or whatever the number is in that ballpark.
So that number is 49.5%.
Magic number you've been aiming for is what, 58? 55, 58?
Not 49.
I thought it was 53.
Sorry, Mike. On my wrote a bit ago. No, listen, I really appreciate this. This is how this works, right? We all are coming and been very open with you all about what the pain problems are there, and we appreciate everybody's patience. And I recognize you all have your boards and your councils. And I'm really not trying to do anything at your expense. I'm really not. I'm trying to understand so I can go back and explain this. Sam, did you run the number? And I should have asked you maybe before you did. Did you run the number if the city of Tucson gets the entire 298 and 300 million? In other words, the excess
Yes.
revenue. Did you run that?
I did run that.
What's that number?
And based on the assumption that we would also have Irvington and the 150 million carve out for the categorical, that number is 54.1%.
You said, Sam?
54.1%.
Thanks.
That's they get the full meeting.
Includes Irvington, includes 150 million carve out, and plus 300 million of excess revenue.
So if it helps, go ahead, I'm
I don't
sorry.
know.
I was gonna say, if it helps, we did update the spreadsheet based on the conversation. We can pull that up so everybody's following the process.
A new spreadsheet may not help.
No, it's the same thing. It's for clarity to make sure everybody's following and we're talking apples and apples. So the 60 was moved over. And then if you go down to the bottom line, keep going. So all those $150 million projects were moved from yellow to green. The balance remaining was 88. And then if you go to the bottom, we still hit the target. Excess still assumed to be 298. And again, the assumption is 2.466 is pessimistic, and 300 million will come in excess revenue. So just to make sure everybody, and with this one, all those roads that were collapsed are now not collapsed anymore. So hopefully you have all the information you need right here.
And Mike, to understand what you just asked Sam then, so essentially the adjustments that Farhad just described, plus the 298 is reserved for the city earmarks, use that phrase we've been doing, that puts it at 54%. That's the question. That's the allocation. Yeah, that's the allocation.
And basically what you all are saying is that the allocation of, we'll call it the green column plus the 298 is not something that you all are comfortable with, meaning the 298 comes with the 62.
No.
Yeah, that's.
What is your thought with regard to if we take the 90, can we could just call it 90 million, take the 90 million off the top? 298 to the city of Tucson. What is the distribution of the dollars after that? In other words, first 90 million is allocated to the city, and then what's the distribution or the allocation after that?
That would be up to the RTA.
Again, I would assume it'll be treated like the budgets. Let's say annually, we have another $10 million. It'll be called for projects. Projects will be submitted and they go through the process.
So there's no, I mean, it's possible they would get money out of that, depending on the board.
Based on this discussion, yes.
Goes back to the board.
I'm sorry, I appreciate that. I don't have the confidence without knowing what that excess revenue might look like for the city of Tucson. We didn't know that.
If I may clarify, I
Available to
think
you like it is to everybody else.
Well, Jerry,
We don't know that either.
I just don't have the same confidence. Sorry. But
Perfect time. I was gonna say, we waited
We
until.
waited just to
Take another
put that, I know.
Well, I guess, I was gonna say something different, but you just said that you don't have that same confidence, but that number came from the city's memo. That,
no, you're not tracking me. What Terry said is that the city would have the same opportunity as everybody else. I use the term competing for that additional
The
money.
RTA.
And I'm saying I don't have the same confidence that the city of Tucson will receive.
so Farhad, do you know in the
Based on
current
what, so?
RTA out of categorical?
You
what
get 70% of the categoricals.
Currently,
in the
based on-
last 20. So that the
What
best
does that mean?
the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. And past precedents have shown this city has gotten more than their fair share with regard to categoricals. So to say that I don't have any level of confidence that the city will put in for projects and that the RTA board will what, turn them down for those projects? I'm not seeing the logic in that at all. I'm not seeing where that there's any truth to that, any basis in reality for that. That's just I want to guarantee that I'm going to get the biggest piece of pie. That my piece of the pie is going to be 58% of the pie. And then you guys can fight over the rest of the pie. I don't care, but I get 58% of the pie.
I do care, but I hear you.
Jeff.
I'm sorry, Jeff. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
You know, I've got to leave here in a few minutes for another meeting, but what I heard Mike say is 98 million of the 298, and is what I heard. And if that's the case, if we were to divide that up into phases, 4 phases, and say the first 24.5 of each phase to Tucson, and then any overage above 24.5 on each phase, each of the every 5 years, then it's available to the region. Would that be something that the group would consider?
Well, think.
So the only problem I have with that, it goes back to what Beth spoke about much earlier, this conversation, the ability to deliver. So if you're in a position where you haven't finished the projects that you already have on your plate, but then you get 24 million that you can't spend because you still have this big plate of food that you have to eat yet. And then you're gonna get another plate of food that you can't finish. But we can't have the plate of food that's sitting there in front of you. That makes no sense to me.
Terry, it's a good point. So is there some language in the policy about a time frame on the dollars for within a phase or something along those lines, and then they can only roll over for so long?
I kind of like the direction that Terry was going in that you get the 92 million, and maybe there's some formulaic way of splitting the dollar, every excess dollar, a certain percentage, because that's the ratio of the 92 million to the total, right? Whatever that is, that gets carved out. Every dollar excess gets carved out to the city, and the rest goes into the regional pot. The region can compete for that, like we've done in the past, and seems like historic. I'm taking it for face value, but it sounds like the city's very well in that process in terms of the allocation of dollars for those projects, which we not.
Shane, maybe I misunderstood Mike. I mean, he said 98 million of the 298 million.
90. I just said, let's just use 90 because I heard 88 and then I heard 92. So if I said 98, I apologize. I intended to say 90. That was what I understood was on the table.
90 million of the excess, but okay, so it's about a third of the excess.
So we could entertain that as a split, if you will, of the excess revenue above 90. Do some count.
Maybe I did misunderstand. So you're saying take the first 90 and then split the rest. You didn't mention a percentage on the rest.
No, I didn't. I just said, I'm asking, that's a question for you. Are you interested in that up to some cap?
I'm sorry, can I just ask Mike? So it's the 150 and 60 and 90, and then a percent above that.
Above that. A percent up to a cap. That's my question.
2%.
I was thinking 1.5.
Okay.
You know, if you get home today and your water shut off.
I know. Don't flush the toilet.
Flush the toilet. Go to the bathroom, have the office. There you go. But just simplistically, I understand. I think we're pretty close. With the 90 million, we'll just call it 90 for now. That puts me just less than half, just shy of half. That's going to be problematic, but I'm willing to go to that and have that conversation with some understanding of what it looks like going forward. That's all. I mean,
How much of the transit is included in that attitude?
Yeah, allow me to, go ahead. And then I'll come to you.
So we are assuming that, or the city's taking credit for 422 million of 610. That includes existing transit service, the 70 million for the BRT project, as well as future transit service.
So,
Big chunk of that, 16.
but I don't think it's a big enough jump. Because I don't think that the bus routes that are going into Oro Valley, Marana, Sal Rita, yeah, bus routes, I'm sorry. And Pima County, that doesn't equal 100 and 200 million dollars.
You think so?
So we are taking credit for all of the transit service that the city of Tucson operates, both inside and outside the city limits. That doesn't take into account the neighborhood circulators or the express routes.
Those are equal to $200 million?
We're reserving, I guess, the difference between 610 and 422 million for non-city of Tucson transit service. We're happy to take more of that if you'd like. The last time we talked, we wanted to make sure we maintained that capacity for transit service in the outlying areas, specifically the neighborhood circulators.
I'd like to see the breakdown. Where that's at.
Well,
Because that seems like a low percentage attributable to that's going to city of Tucson.
So Terry, a while back, RTA staff provided us all the tip spreadsheets, right? The tip program for transit. And so when we pulled that out, and admittedly, there's a little bit of an art to where those things land. I don't think it's that far off, right? We were in the $420 million is what we thought. But having that laid out for us would be super helpful in a table format rather than having to go through line after line item in the tip document.
And I'll be happy to respond to that. So if you recall, we had that conversation, and it's very difficult to project beyond the 5 years because that's all we have. But we can take a stab at it, make an assumption beyond the 5 years. And Jeff and I had this conversation because they operate transit as well. And so making those assumptions as part of this exercise to determine a percentage is just an art. It's not accurate. So, and I see Jeff's hand up as well, but I think we're in the right ballpark. But those numbers are probably close. You get fine tune it more, we can take a stab at it. Jeff has his hand up as well.
Yes, I mean, if Carmine and Farad and Sam all have the same, well, they were your numbers, man. They were your numbers, man. They were Sam's.
Absolutely.
Yes, if you're all on the same page.
Yeah, but again, if I may, so for the purpose of determining what percentage goes where, that's an art. I mean, even some of these projects that we've discussed before, multiple jurisdictions benefit from projects. So I'm not sure if that's the extra effort you want to go through.
I think we have identified that as part of the challenge and sensitivity, by the way. Jeff, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I have to go. If there is a motion and a vote, if staff, Farhad's staff could write it out and verbally, as well as the exhibits, would be nice. So I'd appreciate it, but, anyway, sorry guys, I've got to go. If, my next meeting goes quick and you're still on in about a half hour, I'll come back.
All right, Jeff, I hope we're not, but in case we are, please get back on.
So on that note, just to clarify, the amendments that were on the table, one of the amendments was the Irvington Road project, so I assume that's taken care of. We can remove that amendment.
We're off of page 1.
Oh, Jeff said go to the motion, so I'm going to the motion.
No, he said if there's gonna be a motion.
Okay, all right, but I still want to be on record that my understanding is that amendment is going to be removed.
Well, we'll talk through that about the motion. And by the way, I did say at the beginning, Brad was on the table, but because we constantly in a new meeting, there's probably clarity that we can.
Mr. Chair, for the sake of procedure, I'm going to withdraw my second to the motion.
Yes.
I'll withdraw my motion.
Is there any interest, I'll ask it again, is there any interest in allocation of round number 90 million to the city of the excess revenue with some percentage going to the city beyond that, up to account? Any interest in that?
Mike, so if I understand what you're asking is that the 90 come to the city first, right? Any overages, the 90 come to the city first, and then it's a 30% of any additional overages. What if it was just a percentage, right? So that it's applied as a percentage, 30%, right? Because the 90 is 30% of the 298, right? Roughly. So what if it just for some, well, what's your thought about that? I see the point that you're attempting to make here, and if we look at the 211, right, so that's 60 for Irvington, 150, it's 200, sorry, I keep adding a 1 million to that, right, plus the 92 million or 90, right, that you said was 49%. So if that's what you're getting in the plan, would the distribution of dollars that were over the estimate amount look very differently? Now, you're saying, hey, will we be comfortable reserving 30% of it?
I didn't
You're
say
getting-
30%.
8%.
I think Jeff said same percentage as what the old, I just said, are you interested in the amount? Are you comfortable with an amount more than 90 million, if you will, with excess revenue going to the city of Tucson?
If I may present, based on what Terry was saying, that historically it's been 70% the city. But that's about the 90 is 70 city and 30 to the region.
No,
What time to think about your answer?
no.
So Carmine suggested 30, Bruce suggested 70, both of those are those. I'll say no to yours. Something else in between? But
I was just gonna suggest and add to Carmine's suggestion that if you do that, I would recommend to do it on a rolling 5-year period. So this way you have increments to look back.
I
I
don't
mean,
know.
do we look at doing it proportional to what everybody's allocation is in the plan?
Which would, for us, would be 50% or 41%.
Mike, can I ask you?
Or we leave the others of us not, I don't know, that seems,
So I hear you, and I thought about that, quite frankly. What the challenge I've got though is it'll never move me off of 49%. It's never, it doesn't matter how much we get, it'll never move me out. And I think that's gonna be problematic. That's all I'm saying.
Is there an in-between number that you've been targeting, the 55, 56, I think I was carrying before, and the 49? Is there one that's in your mind rattling around as an in-between?
I'll be real honest, I hadn't even thought about that until we started talking here.
Okay.
But again, if it's the same proportion, it'll be the same proportion all the way through, and that's not gonna work. If it could be more, and again, I'm fine with capping it with some amount. I've got to demonstrate it moving, to a higher percentage, and then it can cap them and fine.
What percentage? I'm sorry, go ahead. Sean.
Mr. Chair, you expressed extreme confidence in the city of Tucson's ability to deliver all these projects.
Yep.
Then why can't the city of Tucson express the same kind of confidence in your ability to compete for these dollars over the next 20 years as you've done historically? I mean, I don't understand why that can't be the case. And if you're getting 30% of every excess dollar to take care of these other projects, then you compete as you have over the last 20 years for the remaining 70%, and that incrementally increases your percentage. So I mean, I'm just, these are your words, and I trust that you know your organization better than anybody. So deliver. You control your own destiny that way. But we're talking about a regional approach, and I think that's a fair regional approach.
I appreciate that. And those are my words. And I do have confidence in what we control. But we don't control that, Shane. We just don't. I mean, that's something that is outside of our control. And all I'm suggesting to you is give us insurance going forward so that I'm not faced with whoever else is sitting around this table arguing and fighting about that in the future. That's all I'm saying.
We have a $2.5 billion project here that is going to inure to the benefit of everyone in this valley. And I hear us as down to the difference of 30% versus 50% of that potential overage. And I don't like it, but for me, looking back and saying, okay, if we do everything we said and give the city 50% of that overage, is that delta that we're discussing right now, that piece, worth it to give to the city to try to salvage?
Does that include the 30%? Because if it includes the 30%, I might be able to jump on board. But if it doesn't, that means that we're earmarking 80%.
No, I'm 30. What I was saying was, what I believe is, we started out saying you get 30%. They said 70, so I'm just spitballing here and saying, let's go to 50.
But does that include the $90 million to finish these other projects in the excess?
Yes.
So it'd be total
50% total cost on top.
Total 50% on the excess. 90 million of that we know is earmarked for these projects that are named.
What I was looking at is going back to the plan, the 150, the 60, right? And then that first chunk of, is it 90? The first chunk of the overage, and then we split it.
But then they'll get 80% of that 50.
Well, do we go 50% of the entire overage?
That's what I'm saying.
Okay,
You do 50% of the entire overage, then we know that 90 million of that, City of Tucson's already identified where that's gonna go.
does that math, okay, so it's the
So it basically leaves about 60 million still to be
the
done.
150, the 60, and then we split the overage, half to the City of Tucson, half to everybody else to split. Does that get us there? Probably not, but let me get what
Yeah.
what are the things we've been discussing for several hours, including the 60 million for Irvington goes in, 150 gets added for the name projects or help the categoricals. And then of anything over the pessimistic figure, projection level, thank you, Rick. We split 50-50, 50% going to the City of Tucson, 50% to be divided between the other jurisdictions as directed by the RTA board.
So not the 90 million, 90 million is.
No, at this point, I'm just saying, let's just do.
So
half.
the people, 300 million. Half of that. Sam, did you run that?
I did run that.
150 million instead of the 90. What is the 150 million for each of us?
It is right at 51%.
What is it?
51%.
But Jen, yours was not based on, it's 50% whatever's overage. It's only 100 million?
Excess dollar that comes in, 50%.
It's split 50.
Thank you.
We're projecting 300.
Potentially, yeah, up to that. To Mike's question. Thank you for that clarification.
So, go ahead.
And Sam, what was the number? 51?
51%.
51, thank you.
I guess I still have the concern that we're gonna be banking a whole lot of money, that the city has 27 projects listed. And we're just gonna keep banking money in. That you agree that, okay, you get that 50% of those overages. Is the city, you said you have the utmost confidence, are you willing to put your money where, your confidence is? And, put some sort of limitation on how long you can bank that money before it's available to the region to use, that so that we don't find ourselves in period 3 with all sorts of money in the bank?
Sam, why not?
Because if we make that money available to the region, then that percentage comes down.
The only reason why that money would become available to the region is because
We couldn't deliver. But here's another thing that we haven't talked about maybe since Monday, is that the city of Tucson plans to earmark a portion of that money for pavement rehabilitation. And that needs to be part of this conversation. Otherwise, we're not interested. Because that,
Okay.
our council has been very clear.
It's easy, thank
There you
you.
have it. I mean, quite frankly,
I think the rest of us aren't interested, Sam. I mean, come on. I mean, the only people that are talking about percentage, hey, Carmine, what is your percentage that the county is getting?
About 18%.
18%. What's your percentage?
Under
Don't know?
a single digit.
Yeah. You don't know? I don't know. Because we're not talking about percentages. The only people that are talking about percentages are you guys. And we keep going back to, well, I gotta have a higher percent. I gotta have a higher percent. I gotta have a higher percent. What about just delivering projects that make sense for the entire region? Because you can't just assign a project as a benefit to a resident at a specific location in Pima County.
Called parochialism.
So I'll be honest with you guys, and I would be terrible at poker. Because I can't hide this anymore. I'm so frustrated with this conversation and where this is going. We've gone round and round and round on this thing for years. And it's time to settle it. And if if we're sitting down at the end of the table, well, if we don't get this, then we're out of here. Come on. This is absurd.
We should,
I doubt that. If I were you, I wouldn't.
if you were me, you'd strangle you. The 50% above or excess revenue, the way you've outlined it, will be problematic. However, what if we flip that and we said the first 150 goes to the city with some caveat on ability to deliver? We'll figure that language out. The second 150 goes to everybody else. Anything above 300 is split 50-50. Now, here's my thinking.
I like them in a car dealership trying to buy a car. I'll do it in Tucson.
Terry, that's where. Here's my thinking. The challenge I'm gonna have, I'm just gonna tell you flat out, you can watch it on the 9th, is the percentage, and I'm sorry that problematic for you. Percentage is important to the mayor and council. They've said it from day one. I didn't even use that word for at least a year and a half, any of the conversations with the mayor and council. Go back and listen to what, watch that. That has become important. We will not be much greater than 40 million. That's going to be, I'm just telling you, that's what we end up with. That's going to be a challenge. 50% going forward is not going to change that number at all. Matter of fact, solidified even further. Okay. I understand that. But if there's a way to suggest, hey, that first 150 goes to the city of the excess, possible 300 million, I can at least say the excess revenue, the first 150, if it only comes in at 150, that goes to the city of Tucson. I can at least feel comfortable saying to them, hey, here's what we have.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair, when in working with my mayor and council, these elements were really, really important to what equates to success as a region from our perspective. And when the town of Sarita put our proposal on the table, it was to try to respect all of the asks on the table and honor what we heard from our board. And so I don't know if I'm going to be able to sell that at all to my council, because we were trying to give 100% of the excess to the city of Tucson to preserve flexibility in the categoricals. And we've done some swapping here, some horse trading, and I think that's part of this exercise. But it's now taken a whole different dynamic shift in terms of reducing flexibility and what's most recently put on the table. And a guarantee on the first dollars on the revenue by way of excess. So that's a big lift. Out of respect for what you're dealing with, Mike, and the city of Tucson, where the council, your mayor council want to go. And I mean this with undue respect, because it seems like your council has a vision and a trajectory that they believe, they have, they see reality, and they see that in their grasp with your potential election in June or July. I mean, what's the hurry in terms of an election for this bond? I mean, what if we see what your council, what you guys do, and whether or not you're successful with that, and then we react as a region in terms of the outcome.
Certainly an option.
I mean,
Terry, I think you asked last time because you were sitting here, so remember you asked me. And I've already said, there is not a list of projects or types of projects that is on the table. There's conversation about exploring, and it's the whole gamut. And so I mean, if you want to wait, that's fine, but I would suggest you don't have to wait until July. You'll know probably in the next 45 days what the language is to develop. And then you'll know what the ask is. We'll all.
So one of those things you guys are considering is pavement pres.
Not specifically. I'm just telling you, we haven't put anything on the table yet. We know there's community needs. We actually, as a part of our budget process, solicited feedback from the public on needs that they see. And by the way, you're all welcome to look at that budget survey, and you can see it's only 5 questions or something, but you can see it's not trying to drive transportation or anything in particular. It's really asking questions about needs in the community.
I guess, when I brought it up 2 days ago, it was a little bit of a different angle. It was, hey, let this process play out from truly a regional perspective, and then the city of Tucson can utilize this upcoming election to augment or supplement what you feel isn't being reached in this effort. And that seemed to be pretty, I know that if you guys were successful in doing that, when I come and buy a car in Tucson, I'm helping your projects along because I'm paying that tax, right?
So I can also drive in on city streets, which it's all part of it. So where do y'all want to go? Here's a little frustration to my right here. What do you want to do? So I think there's
Mr. Chair,
thoughts on the proposal.
I would be willing to consider, obviously we've done the Irvington 60 million over. We've taken 150 million of the bucket, the categorical bucket, and earmarked that for a decent chunk of the listed named projects that you have in that. And then a split 50-50 on every dollar in excess. That's what.
I would ask for clarification on that, or maybe for consideration before I call for a second. At least from a city of Tucson perspective, that the excess revenue would be identified by the mayor and council in terms of categories that are listed within the plan, as not something that's not on the plan. That's first. And the second.
I'm sorry, just that over.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, of the
Got it.
overage, based on you said 50-50. So that's one. 2, that it's all of the categories, not just, I think the language there was just on the categoricals, and I think it needs to be all of them. That's my opinion. And then the third is that it doesn't preclude the mayor and council from allocating dollars for modernization or paving rehabilitation of that overage. that,
Which when we talked before, that has to be a plan element in order to be eligible.
it
Correct?
has to be somewhere in the plan,
Base plan.
base plan in order to be able to do that.
The clarification, I believe the question was just for the access, but then you said all categories. I mean, all categories with excess money.
That's correct.
Okay.
You can
All
spend.
categories
With excess money. Okay, got it.
With that payment pres,
with the extra, with the extra dollars. Is that
Correct.
the intent?
That sounds like a.
and Shane, I would you making that in the form of a motion?
I'm asking if that's included in the conversation or in the motion. I'm asking before I call for a second.
I don't know. Let me think about that for a minute. It was the last bullet that got me. It was the
Okay,
last bullet
so,
that got me.
so for purposes of discussion. I'll call for a second. Is there a second to that?
Can I get it restated? Yeah, I want to capture this.
So my statement was I would be comfortable supporting taking 60 million from the categorical bucket from the base plan so that we can fund Irvington.
Categorical to Irvington. Thank you. Okay.
Then we would allocate 150 million of the residual in that categorical for City of Tucson named projects. And the balance of that categorical would be open to the region as we normally program that bucket of money. And that in any excess dollars that the region receives would be split 50-50 above the base. That's what I say.
Okay. 50-50, I got a second by Terry. Okay.
Can I just ask for consideration of the motion maker and the seconder? On the base, there are sub-element breakdowns. And I would ask that we're not approving the subcategorical breakdowns, like for transit, for example, that we're approving the 610 million with that breakout. We've already talked before that transit should go to fund existing service, high capacity bus route expansion, and the rest of it goes to expansion in the region. And then similarly, on this base presentation, safety and active transportation have been split out. In prior iterations, they were combined. So, combining them as a dollar amount that we've talked about, right? It would end up being the 256.5 minus the 60 minus the 150. And then the last thing I'd ask, we indicated earlier that we had some specific safety active transportation projects in the county, Camino de la Canoa and White House Canyon Road. And I would like to ask that those be named in the categorical of safety and active transportation.
I'm happy to amend my motion to reflect those clarifications.
Okay, let me see if I've got those. So you want the two county name projects? Two county categoricals are named. Are named, and forgive me, Carmine, I kind of got lost on where you went. Would you like to just operate off totals for the categoricals? Except the totals, not the sub breakout.
Yeah, there's only 40 left after that. So $40 million active transportation plus safety.
So it's active transportation and safety get combined, right?
Okay, active transportation safety for.
And that the transit element, we're approving the 610, not the subcategorical breakdown.
But with the caveat that what we've talked about before.
Maintaining existing service, high capacity bus, and also new route expansion.
One we've always held, maintain HCT expansion. The expansion. And Shane, you said all three of those conditions are acceptable to you?
Yes, I'm willing to accept that in my motion.
Great.
Yes. So I have a point of clarification on that. Is it your intent that the mayor and council of the city of Tucson will have the say, if you will, in where dollars are expended within the plan or categories for the excess revenue that's allocated to Tucson?
Yes, within those Within the category. Within the category,
Yeah,
yeah.
to that. Okay, that's included.
Okay, so is that an amendment?
No, I'm not making them. I'm just asking for clarification. So if you want to make the amendment, that's fine. I want to clarify. Yeah,
I think it'd be, far how to be cleaner if it was an amendment, correct?
then I don't know if I can.
Again, so some of these are policy discussions, so we can,
No, but I understand the policy, but I
Yeah.
want to make sure there's clarity in what the motion
Yeah.
includes as a recommendation to the policy. So
So, Mike, that's the excess, the mayor and
Mayor and
council,
council will have,
the mayor and council
I want to use the word authority, but
have authority.
will be able to designate where the excess funds that are allocated to the city of Tucson go within the entirety of the plan,
Yes, funds
all categories.
within
Categorical framework of the.
all categorical
So in
framework.
other words, if we see excess monies in the corridor section, that your mayor and council could identify a project to use those monies as a corridor project.
Don't they already do that?
no,
Is that what
so
you're
the-
saying?
let me clarify that, and you had it correctly on Monday. Within RTA statutes, you can add a named corridor.
Cannot.
You cannot. No, they have to be named on the ballot.
Okay, so
You can do all the other
what this
categories.
means then,
Well,
yes.
So remember the context of this. The projects that are listed under the safety and active transportation came from corridor L plus. Moved them down to get them basically addressed, identified, so that I can again show them. I just want to make it real clear that I can go back in and with the mayor and council can designate where those dollars are. And we'll list them, by the way. We'll include a longer list here of potential projects going forward. I just want to make sure that there's clarity that the mayor and council will be able to designate.
So Farhad, if I understand you, if we keep it out of the named roadway category, as Mike and Sam have done, that should allow that to be funded then with access as a categorical.
That's categorical within the framework of the RTA statute, yes, but if it's a named corridor, it has to be named on the ballot.
Then what I may do is suggest, not now. What I may do is identify corridors not funded on the green column that I would consider in the future priorities, if you will, for that extra money.
So that you could do more corridor projects.
If I needed to. Yeah, I'm trying to be open on what the framework is and going back to the priorities.
So that'll give you the flexibility because it's named on the ballot.
So that would be, I just want to make sure there's clarity that that's where we're headed. Any concerns about that?
I don't see how you would do it otherwise. I mean, all of us would have our. I think all of us would have our boards or our councils involved in identifying where those monies are going.
Yeah, I'm not clear on how this would differ from the process that.
It's just,
You need that, I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's good.
Okay.
all right.
Yeah.
You had other pieces too.
I do. Third is the green does not include the BRT. Assume that was, the spirit intent was that the BRT would be funded.
That was just added as a.
Just want to make sure that
suggestion
that
to
was
break it down to
included.
3 categories.
I think it's one of the roads that, but yes, let's clarify.
Just want to make sure.
Yeah, it's in the
Thank you.
610.
And then the last thing is I would like to suggest again that we have a line item that allows for modernization and pavement rehabilitation. So that if the mayor and council, now keeping in mind that it could be that the mayor and council decides that is not a priority in the future, that we have other corridor needs or safety needs that will need to be addressed before that. But I just want to make sure that we have language in there that gives us the flexibility.
So Farhad, I've got a question. Is it possible to have a named element with a 0 amount allocated to that to preserve its ability?
No, I believe what we discussed on Monday was that you add that to the description of funds that are in excess of the ballot, and those could be used for capital maintenance. So there will be a description on the $300 million within that description. And it would also include capital maintenance, and that's, I think, the way you can address that issue.
I would suggest that not just be for City of Tucson, but that gives everyone the opportunity for the excesses.
Net maintenance is only for RTA funded.
One more time.
Anything you do for preservation or maintenance would only be for RTA funded projects, or you can.
Passed, I mean.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's by statute. I'm not sure,
You don't
whatever the
worry about
statute
that. I
says.
just want to be clear.
You're sounding like you want this anywhere on the city's corridor network.
No, I mean, yes, I do, but I go back to the Farhad said, within the RTA statutes. My understanding was it had to be RTA, previous RTA project. If that's not the case, then
I just want to be real clear.
thank
No,
you.
I just wanna be
I
clear.
appreciate that.
It's not just for anything. Yeah.
You know, again, I'm okay with more flexibility there, but if it's restricted by the statute, then we're restricted.
No, it's not. So capital
So it can't
maintenance on any regional corridors would be eligible.
I would suggest and encourage you all to consider that.
Mr. Chair, I think I've heard the ask. I just realized, I want to acknowledge that our board has really wrestled with this pavement preservation issue. And I don't know if I feel comfortable including that element in my motion. However, there is still the board discussion to occur, and they could bring that up and wrestle with it again, but I know that they haven't been in support of it previously.
Sure, Shane and Terry, Mike, I've got two items on your amendment. One of them is Tucson Mayor and Council have authority to designate excess funds within the categorical framework. Basically within the plan framework.
They would have to recommend to the RTA board.
And then two, a line item element, or if I had said there's a description in there that's added for modernization pavement plus. So the mechanics, it sounds like still have to be worked.
The second one was not accepted.
So you don't accept the second condition, okay? So Shane doesn't accept, but you accept the first one?
I'm concerned by the caveat that Farhad just said, which is subject to the RTA board. Just gonna tell you, it makes me nervous because that is a policy that can be changed. And I wanted something more concrete. I understand it. I'm just voicing it.
I would ask, Rick, that the language isn't just the City of Tucson Council, that it's a regional policy suggestion, that agency boards or councils can make that determination. I think that's just pretty much what we do anyway, but rather than have it specific to the city mayor and council, it's just all of us.
Yeah, I did capture that this is for use on regional corridor and that it's available for all the jurisdictions. So that's.
I think you're mixing,
Yeah.
we've moved off of the pavement, right? We're talking about the authority to use or allocate dollars that are over the estimate. And what Shane is suggesting is to broaden that out so that it's not limited just to the city mayor and council, but it's all of the regional elected bodies have the ability to allocate their share of the overage.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just that second condition.
With RTA boards approved.
The first.
Oh, so you were on the first one that everybody has the same purview, so it's not just. So it's all region municipalities, all governing boards can designate excess funds. So it's basically taking Mike's and modifying it to be available for everybody.
Again, I think this is like kind of a moot point because that's probably how we all operate anyway.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I'm failing to follow, how maybe what Mike is saying is he wants the ability of the mayor and council to be able to do whatever they want with the money, regardless of what the RTA board
Right.
says. Is that what you're
Well, that's-
saying or no?
I'm with Terry and that's how I understand Mike's.
Yeah, because if that's the case, I don't second that.
And I wouldn't amend my motion to reflect that.
I think it still has to go through, I think it still has to go through the process. I mean, you can decide, you want to put forward this project, to the RTA board and they say yes. I don't know how many projects have ever been submitted to the board where they said no, but I think it still has to be the regional board that says yay or nay.
And you had some of that, I'm sorry, you had some of that language about it's determined by by the mayor and council, subject to ratification by the board. Approval will not be, there are lots of languages that say, and it will not be unduly withheld or, something, so that we're saying, that we assume it will be in accordance with what the jurisdiction wants. It just needs legally to be approved by the RTA board. And again, I'm not the lawyer, but there's generally language about unless, it won't be withheld.
I'm just trying to figure out what problem we're trying to solve. It seems like this
The
is like,
problem we're trying to solve, quite frankly, is I want assurance for the city of Tucson to be able to designate the projects that they deem important for priorities.
regardless of what the board.
I don't know that it's regardless of. I just want to make sure that the city of Tucson has the ability to identify the priorities that are going to be funded.
Subject to board approval. Identify a way.
I just want the city of Tucson. I mean, I understand what you're saying.
Is
and I'm not trying to
ratification
be-
better than approval?
I'm not trying to be disrespectful to the board or the board's role. What I'm trying to do is solidify how those dollars will be used. If you're not comfortable with it, I understand.
Yeah, no,
But I'm just, what I'm trying to do is take out the subjectivity of that going forward. That's all.
we all play by those rules.
I know, I understand.
So I think I would not support that motion, that amendment to my motion, if that's the intent.
All right. That's fine. All right, further discussion on that. So,
Yeah, just a quick question on the categorical, the safety act categorical. That includes the 35 million carve out for South Tucson.
Yes.
Yes. It's on the plan.
So there's,
make sure, yes, it does, correct?
Yes.
Actually, I apologize. At 40 left, out of 40, 35 was South Tucson, so there's
25 million.
5 left for everybody else.
that was my understanding.
Good catch.
Thank you. So, let's, I think we do have it covered or not?
Yeah, I think,
There's only 5 million left for everybody else.
Everybody else.
yes,
Yep.
5 million for the whole 20-year plan.
Catch them.
Good catch, yep.
So the clarity that that's the city of South Tucson, all things we talked about.
So Mike, I've captured both of your amendments, but Shane does not support them. So, yeah, I've got.
Yeah.
Can Rick read it back? Mike, can Rick read it back so we all understand what it is?
Go ahead, Rick.
I can't, let me let Sherry and Terry. And Terry, or Beth.
Go ahead.
You guys ready? Okay. So the motion from Shane, I've got 4 items. $60 million from categorical for Irvington. Want to make sure he's good with it.
That should be true. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna say
So
that.
the maker of the motion.
Yeah, sorry, man. Everybody wants a repeat on it. $60 million goes from the categorical into the, the safety and active mode categorical into Irvington. Allocate $150 million to the named City of Tucson projects from that same section. The balance then gets divided to the region. However, as Sam clarified, 35 has already been identified and allocated to the city of South Tucson, leaving $5 million plus for the rest of the region. Any excess above and beyond the pessimistic projection level is split 50-50 across the region, seconded by Terry. Carmine's amendments are that the 2 county categorical projects are named. Young and Valley, correct?
That would take the balance down to 0, right?
Yeah, we've exceeded it.
So,
Yeah, I'm gonna withdraw my second.
On my motion.
Actually, let me do the math again. We had 46 left,
Not anymore.
minus 35, minus your 5.8, so you're 0 after that almost. There's not much left.
Yeah, that's that flexibility.
Okay, so you guys are withdrawing the support on Carmine's amendments.
I'm withdrawing my second to his motion and I'm withdrawing his motion.
Okay, motion entirely withdrawn. Thank you.
And there's absolutely no flexibility. We're not meeting that criteria from the council, from the board.
Mike, I have a question. So if we've not taken any action today, the last action TMC took was on the TMC modified plan. Does that action then still hold as it goes back to the RTA board? Because that's the last action, that's the last plan we've approved as a body.
So currently, the only two plans that are one approved by CAC, one approved by TMC, those are forwarded already to the board. So those are the two plans they have. At their request, they wanted some additional feedback from this group. So by definition, those are still the two plans they have.
And the feedback that we gave over the last 2 days is that we increased debt service to 77 million, contingency to 100 million.
Correct.
Beyond
That's
that,
the
no
only
other
feed- That's
changes.
the only feedback we have so far. Yep, acted on.
Acted up, yeah.
And that's based on the additional 125 million revenue from the report. So what will be shared with the board tomorrow?
That's it.
Did we
But-
take a vote on
but
the?
there's-
contingency?
Yes, it was at the previous meeting. It was,
We took a vote on.
at, yeah, it was at the March meeting on the 100 million, or maybe.
I didn't think we took a
We didn't
vote.
take any action.
I thought that was, well, you could today if you like, but I believe it was at the March meeting, but yes, so maybe just for clarification. Please make a motion that 100 million contingency, 77 debt service, so that would be the feedback.
And that would be solidified.
That 125 million in March.
Anyway, if you don't mind, do it again today, just to be clear.
I'll call for a motion on that. We're so close. Based, you can see the finish line.
Mr. Chair, I'll just bring up the allocation here. If we got hit with the 35 million going to South Tucson, how's everybody feel about dropping the contingency from 100 million down to 65?
Dan,
Oh, you missed it. You hit the motion, that's been withdrawn. You missed that.
I was here for that.
Oh, you got
I
that,
couldn't
okay.
wait.
Bob brought up just now, a proposal to reduce the contingency from 100 by 35 to 65 to fund the South Tucson project, the 35 million. Maybe that you just said that before you walked in. I just want to make sure that it's not in the form of a motion, just as a table.
Wasn't there about 32 million-ish to play with? There was like 25 million excess plus there was some additional revenue in the plan.
This is the correct information updated. If there was any money left on the table, this is the correct information currently.
Let me throw this out. Maybe the approach, and I know the board's meeting tomorrow. Maybe the approach is to say that we have talked through these issues at length, nauseum. Identify the 4 or 5 things that are out there we've talked about, not able to reach consensus or approval on it. Bringing back the specific suggestion on a contingency amount and a debt service amount, their consideration. If I were them, they're gonna be happy and either punt it back or something else. What was the contingency before? Was it 0?
Contingency,
No, 40 was the carryover, was the
Yes.
carryover, whatever we call it.
both CAC plan and TMC plan zeroed out the contingency, only left the 40 for the overlap.
And debt service was 50.
That service was 77 based on this proposal.
Debt service, well, on the CAC plan was 77, TMC was 37.
37.
Yeah, then it was revised to 50 and then 77.
We have added, everything stays the same. We've added 140 million
From the 125 extra.
Do the plan. So we got 125 and we've added 140 million in expense.
There was some money that was not already programmed, so there was capacity.
Plus we redistributed the timeframes and the periods of 7 projects.
Pleasure.
We did.
Give credit for everything, man. Shane, did you want to make a motion going back on for the debt service amounts?
No, I don't. That's a good answer. Here's my suggestion. I think the charge that the board gave us was to suggest the dollars for, or suggest or relook at debt service, given cash flow and contingency. My suggestion would be to suggest to them that the excess revenue that we've identified for the U of A, which is 125 million, be distributed to those two. If they want us to continue to look at the rest of the plan, we'll keep looking at the rest of the plan. And I'm going to try to whittle it down into something that's an elevator speech. That's in essence what we kind of boiled it down to. And I'm not even comfortable that we could get a motion passed on that, but that's the conversation that I could report tomorrow, or Terry, you can report.
I was going to say,
Who's the liaison of the board? I didn't see you.
No.
He doesn't know who it is, but he absolutely.
I'm happy to convey it, and I will try to be as objective as I can in terms of conversation and report it as accurately as I can.
and you're summarizing that as a discussion, no action taken.
I'm
Yeah.
just,
That's fair.
what do y'all think?
I can't see that. We understand that. I'm sorry. So excess dollars go to contingency and debt?
The excess revenue.
Can you put that in here?
I thought we did, yeah.
Well, no, what he's talking about is the 125 million that was identified by Geller is put into, 100 million is put into
Yeah, okay.
contingency and the remainder is put into.
It's just like, okay,
Well, I think
okay.
the plan
Rather than
already.
figure out how to divide
had-
everything up, you put it in
I
contingency
think
and
the
leave it
plan
to
already
the
had
RTA board.
77.
Well, depending on which plan you're looking at. So one had 77, the other one 37.
One at 36. Right.
So Paul, if I'm correct, we haven't motioned on the 77, right? That's been
No.
discussed, but that's never been motioned.
It's in one of the.
At a previous meeting, we had a motion on the 100, but that's okay. We can still continue talking.
It was zero, but that's what I'm calling is I think we went from 0 to 100. That's what.
But he's asking, was there a motion? And I believe there was, but that's okay. We'll keep talking.
And Mike, your summary, yeah. 77 seems to be where we voted on most recently.
All right, what's your pleasure? A motion to adjourn,
Like,
or you want to do something else?
Oh, yes.
I think if we give them enough time, definitely be back on here. Are you back? Hey, Jeff. thank
I
you
came
for
back,
coming
I came back Monday too, and it was
so,
Jane and Carmine.
so shifting Oro Valley's money then, over to the city too, so gets us, I think, where we needed to and.
What percentage of it?
Yeah.
That's funny, really funny.
I understand the difficulty here, and this is, I think, what it takes. And I do say, I appreciate when you express the contrary thought. I'm thinking of other things, but that you think, that you appreciate that, because I think that's how we extract a superior plan or a better plan. Painful and frustrating and all things, which we didn't have to go through. We are, we do.
No, I don't think we can go back to the board without anything. I mean, we've spent how many hours, days sitting here around the table. And to not go back without, and at least say, hey, we settled on contingency, we settled on debt service. We struggled with what to do with the categoricals in terms of naming projects within them. We thought we were close, but we couldn't quite get there.
But I
The
think,
naming of some projects.
yeah, support the naming of some projects, what that percentage is. I mean,
I mean, by way of a motion and there's nowhere else, to give. I mean, so instead of 150, what about 104? Because then that reserves that 40, that 40 or 46 million for the flexibility. And then let the board wrestle with that in terms of whether that's enough flexibility or they're willing to go less on the flexibility side, but we've given them a plan that they can chew on. I don't know if that passes.
is that a motion?
I'll make that motion.
You read back.
Let me take my tired hand. Okay, sorry.
Well, but if I may, just to make sure we're talking apples and apples. So within the categories, we have $46 million remaining. The motion would be to accommodate the for South Tucson and reduce the 150 million to 100. So now we have a little bit more money left in the categories. That's my
The
understanding. of
difference
what you're
between the
saying.
36, so we have,
That $46 million.
So reduce the 150 to 100, or maybe a different number, but then.
you
take
got
out
36, so you got what, 14?
So then are you putting your motion back on the table with a change that it's instead of 150, it's 104?
Well, just on that one issue.
The county has a couple in there too.
Yeah, exactly. You got 5.8.
So I can say everything.
Maria's, I think it's close to about 100 million. Muscle Meadows.
All right, so same as before. Okay, so we're 60 million to Irvington.
So you take longhand lessons here. Or shorthand.
Okay, second one. So the allocation of 150 is now 100. Okay. Okay, it's 100.
That'll accommodate South
Everything else is the
Tucson.
same.
That'll accommodate South Tucson and Pima County's allocation.
Okay, so balanced to region. And I'm staying consistent with how it was on excess split 50-50.
Yep.
That's it. Okay,
That was all. Okay, Carmine, because they didn't support your previous, is your amendment back on the table? Well, we got a motion.
If you don't mind, I would recommend let's act on that and then come back with any additional potential motions, just to move the ball a little bit.
But I do mind, because I think let's make sure we've got clarity what the vote is. If there's an amendment, it's supposed to be called for. First of all, do we have a second on that?
I don't have a second yet.
Second.
Second from Terry.
Second. Is there an amendment to that motion or any addition?
The only other point I made was not adopting the subcategorical allocations, right?
Combine the elements
Combined safety and active transportation.
with about 40 left.
Where my previous motion ran off the rails was when I realized that there absolutely wasn't any flexibility in that bucket. So all I'm doing is amending my motion. Everything else stays the same. I'm just amending my motion to create that flexibility in that bucket. Not a whole lot of money, but if we can tell the board, hey, there's some flexibility there. And then let them wrestle with whether they're comfortable or not with that.
There's a motion, a second on the floor. Is there any amendment to that or any other conversation on that?
I just want to be
Shane
clear.
say is that his motion left off the exact same place, combining safety and active transportation and not adopting the subcategorical breakout for transit.
So it's my previous motion
Understand?
amended to create
Just changing that one.
flexibility in the.
And I'm asking, is there any amendment to that? Sam, you had a hand up?
I just want to make sure we're voting, or that the motion is to support the new modified plan. Right?
It's basically those,
With these amendments.
those items that are amended.
So read a plan with these.
And I'm, is the Carmine's amendments of the three items he had laid out built into your motion? So those are included.
Yes, Rick.
Okay, thank you. All right, Secretary. Amendments.
Motion,
Addition.
second includes previous amendments, previous conversations. Anybody have any other comments, questions, or amendments, or anything else they want to discuss before we call?
Guys, I'm sorry, I just, I came back. I know you guys made a lot of progress. So, I hate to have you run all through it, but if,
Just say no, Jeff. You have a question, Jeff? I'm sorry, we've been at this now for a few hours, so.
I know. So my understanding then is the Irvington moved back into the named projects, correct?
Yes.
The safety element, we're gonna name 100 million of the we're gonna name those, and those are gonna be Tucson named projects,
Yes.
safety.
And
Plus 35 for South Tucson.
Plus Pima County's project.
So that 100 million includes Tucson, South Tucson, and the county.
No,
No?
Jeff, my motion has 100 million being called out of the categorical bucket for Tucson. Then there's 35 million of that categorical bucket for South Tucson.
Right?
Plus the two projects named projects by the county that total roughly 5 or 6 million.
5.8.
5.8 million that would be called out. The balance would be left open for the region to meet the flexibility criteria that we were given by the board at their last meeting.
Got it. And that residual, it was the 170 minus those? Is that what it is?
It's more than that. It's the 170 plus the 86 minus those things.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, Jeff, and Carmen, that was your point. Those get combined into one big bucket.
Yep. Okay. Got that. So the excess then to the region, and then Tucson had agreed not to apply for the excess. And then transit element as broken out on those sheets given today, the 610, and such. I know those numbers don't quite match up. And then on the final excess, the 298 million.
That's a 50 split.
50-50 split of the excess. Okay, got it. I'm good. No more questions.
Yeah, appreciate it. We'll give Terry a minute to come back. Sure would like him to be able to weigh in on this.
I'm sorry. Could you repeat the motion?
Those are not those.
That's one of the things it says is still looking.
So this is what it felt like, that you walk into a deadly quiet room.
Yeah. All right,
See, it
everybody,
doesn't feel good when they're all quiet when you walk back.
All right, so we have a motion. Been clarified, I believe. And a second. Further discussion. We'll call for the question. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Nay.
Nope. Please, so
Chair votes nay.
Mike, no. This. And
That was a no.
I thought I heard Sam.
Liz and Sam.
Mike, Liz, and Sam are no, all rest yes.
Did we?
Hearing no other business, was anybody online other than Jeff? Jeff, you on there?
I hear snoring.
I voted aye.
Thank you. Anything else for the good of the order? We stand adjourned. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.